Imagine being stripped of your humanity, dragged into a grim grand temple in chains, and handed over to the very monster who calls himself your father. Welcome to the dark, heartbreaking past life of our hero, where death wasn't an escape, it was just the start of an eternal nightmare. Loud guards shout through the cold stone hall, demanding the death row prisoner be presented immediately before the emperor's throne. Flanked by gigantic armored guards, a frail young girl stands bound tightly in massive iron chains, her white dress soaked in her own blood. Talk about an absolute villain origin story, except she's the innocent victim trapped in a twisted royal conspiracy. The official tribunal identifies her as the atrocious criminal Disti Airy, bound in heavy, soul-crushing shackles that bite into her bloodied skin. The tribunal reads out her supposed crimes, declaring her as the disgraced 17th imperial princess who allegedly colluded with foreign powers and rebel factions to overthrow the crown. Man, talk about shifting all the blame onto a voiceless scapegoat. Sitting smugly upon his gilded throne, Emperor Krita II looks down with a nauseating grin beside the high priest, ready to sign off on her brutal execution. Seriously, this guy easily wins the award for worst father in fantasy history. Forced onto her knees inside a glowing crimson magic circle, Princess Disti is pinned down beneath heavy iron chains suspended from the temple ceiling. With absolute malice, the high priest delivers the final judgment, loudly sentencing the tragic princess to the ultimate, inescapable punishment. Yet beneath her matted hair, a faint, heartbreaking smile touches her lips, welcoming the sweet embrace of final rest. Tears stream silently down her dirty cheeks as she whispers internally, relieved that after fighting to protect everyone until her very last breath, she can finally be free from this hellish existence. Suddenly, a deep, sinister voice breaks the heavy silence, mocking her peaceful expression and shattering her last moment of hope. Emperor Krita leans forward with a disgusting sneer, taunting her for thinking that sacrificing her life for those filthy rebels would bring her any true fulfillment. Wow, this villain is so cartoonishly evil, it's infuriating. The Emperor bursts out into a wicked laugh, callously pointing out that she can't even offer a witty retort because her voice was stolen from her long ago. Sweeping his regal cape around with dramatic flair, Krita continues his sickening rant, cursing the rebel leader and the allied duchies she sacrificed everything to save. Leaning down right into her face, the Emperor drops a crushing bombshell, revealing that those precious allies she bled for don't even consider her a true companion. Disti's eyes widen in sheer horror. Krita mockingly explains that the military commander she trusted, Drak Monarch, is already negotiating peace with the Empire and receiving a grand imperial title for his efforts. Bending low over her trembling body, the Emperor whispers that the one and only condition demanded by the rebel leader for total withdrawal is her immediate, gruesome execution. Disti breaks down crying, unable to process the soul-crushing betrayal of the people she called her friends. Talk about a dagger straight through the heart. As her mind unravels, tragic memories of her miserable past flood her consciousness, recalling how she was born to a commoner mistress, shunned by the Emperor, and treated as useless garbage by the palace guards. Even her own mother hated her existence, blaming the child for destroying her dreams before forcing poison down her throat that permanently destroyed her vocal cords. Can this girl's backstory get any more depressing? Cruel imperial relatives tormented her like an animal, forcing the starved little girl to lick their dirty boots just for a scrap of leftover bread. Her only ray of light was the fourth princess, Modai. Sweet Princess Modai cradled her gently, decorating her hair with white daisies and giving her the precious, loving name Fleur. But that fragile happiness was violently ripped away when Modai was forced into a political marriage and met a horrifying, bloody death on the road. Overwhelmed by blinding grief and rage, Fleur's hidden magical power unleashed itself in a destructive burst, catching the cold eyes of her tyrant father. To ensure his new weapon could never run away, the Emperor placed an eternal blood curse upon her, forcibly renaming her Disti the Destroyer of Ari. Branded with the painful curse mark upon her back, the young princess was thrown directly onto the front lines as a living weapon of mass destruction. Year after year, tiny Disti was forced to swing her blade, bathing in the blood of countless enemies just to survive another day. She walked the fine line between life and death completely alone, believing that a cold, solitary existence was her only destiny. But then she met warriors who treated her like a human being. Drac, Sibet, Leaf, and Fox, comrades who illuminated her dark world. They raised their shields to protect her back in battle, surrounding her with a warmth she had never felt before. They shared sweet treats, coins, and genuine laughter together, filling her cold heart with radiant hope. Honestly, watching them betray her after all these wholesome moments makes my blood boil. But like a fragile mirror, that beautiful illusion shattered into a million sharp pieces when they traded her life for power and noble status. Tears pour from her eyes as she silently screams, questioning if every single word of love and loyalty they ever uttered was just a pathetic lie. Resigning herself to her tragic fate, Disty closes her eyes, accepting that a life filled with endless pain should simply end. Unsheathing a massive black-bladed sword, Emperor Krita smiles wickedly, declaring that he won't allow her soul to escape so easily. Crimson magic circle flares into a violent inferno, trapping her soul in an inescapable loop of eternal torment. Yanking her head back by her silver hair, the tyrant emperor whispers a terrifying curse into her ear. With a sickening squelch, Krita impales her chest with his blade, declaring that even across reincarnation, her soul will forever inherit the blood-cursed lineage of Eradifus. As her blood spatters across the glowing runes, the monster vows to find her reborn self, crush her throat the second she's born, and raise her as a mindless pet. Okay, this emperor seriously needs to be stopped. He taunts her dying body, promising that once she grows old enough to hold a blade again, he will force her to slaughter the very comrades who betrayed her. The emperor flashes a sinister, demonic smirk, eagerly anticipating the bloody day of her rebirth. Flung into the scorching flames of execution, Disty's mind cries out in agony, protesting that she never did anything wrong to deserve such cruelty. As fire consumes her vision, she asks the harsh heavens why everyone despises her, abuses her, and throws her away like trash. She believed that dying would finally bring an end to her suffering, but the dark curse binds her soul to endless reincarnation. Suddenly, loud cries echo through a bright room as nurses rush around frantically shouting that the Grand Duchess has given birth. Resting inside a plush baby crib, twin infants wriggle in their swaddling blankets as the maids joyfully announce the arrival of the newborn Grand Ducal babies. Opening her tiny green eyes, newborn baby Isle realizes with profound dread that her soul has indeed been forced into a new body. But inside her fragile newborn frame, the lingering phantom agony of the execution flames burns with unbearable intensity. Her throat feels like it's being torn to shreds from the ancient poison, while her tiny body burns from the residual curse of her past life. Clutching her tiny fists against her chest, panting, baby Isle realizes she must bear all the excruciating trauma and pain of her previous life while starting over from scratch. Tears pool in her innocent eyes as she gazes into the void, realizing that escaping her tragic past won't be easy, but this new life might just give her the second chance she truly deserves. What an intense backstory drop! What if you reincarnated into a powerful noble dynasty, only to hear the shadowy elites order your immediate exile the second you take your first breath? Up on the dimly lit terrace, ruthless figures casually order a servant to snatch the newborn girl and haul her away out of sight. The helpless baby girl can only stare up in total utter confusion, wondering what sinister plot is unfolding before her tiny eyes. With the high stakes set, the servant bolts down the grand hallway with the infant wrapped tight in her arms. As the giant palace doors swing open, the baby panics, wondering if she's being hauled straight into the Emperor's terrifying grip. Talk about starting life on extreme difficulty mode. She tries to piece together her bleak situation while being carried through the dark corridors. Since no mortal can defy the Emperor's iron decree, it makes sense why they're rushing her away. Plus, who would ever want a newborn cursed with blood curse power? Outside in the midnight air, the maid dashes toward a waiting carriage while nightbugs chirp around them. Inside the bumpy carriage, the wooden wheels clatter loudly against the rough dirt road. Tears well up in the baby's eyes as she cries out in her mind, asking why fate didn't just let her die in her past life. She dreads having to face that terrifying figure or endure another miserable existence. Suddenly, the heavy wooden carriage wheels grind to a harsh halt on the gravel, screeching as the driver pulls back the horses. The maid steps down into the chilly night air holding the tightly wrapped infant. The baby blinks in confusion. realizing the carriage ride ended way faster than expected. Is it just me, or does every Manhwa carriage move at absolute warp speed when the plot demands it? The maid sprints across the courtyard toward a massive, imposing estate lit up under the moonlight. Looking up at the dark Victorian mansion, the little girl realizes this definitely isn't the Imperial Palace. The maid pushes open the massive front doors, stepping into a pitch-black entrance hall that looks like it belongs in a ghost story. She hurriedly places the tiny wrapped baby onto a cold leather sofa. Wrapped in her thin blanket, the baby shivers from the icy chill in the air, murmuring internally about how freezing it is. The heavy door snaps shut as the maid walks away. The baby blinks in total disbelief, realizing she was left alone in the dark instead of being presented to the emperor. Laying alone on the couch, the baby sighs deeply, thinking God might have actually granted her wish for freedom after all. But as she stares at the ceiling, she bitterly realizes that reincarnating as a defenseless child was a massive mistake. She tells herself that dying for good would have been a million times easier than starting all over again. Right at that moment, rapid footsteps echo across the floor, making her open her eyes wide. The maid returns carrying a small bowl filled with a mysterious glowing green liquid. Staring up at the dark, featureless silhouette standing over her, the baby trembles, asking herself what on earth that woman is holding. A single drop of the hot green liquid drips onto the baby's cheek. The baby flinches in pain, shocked by how scalding hot it feels on her delicate baby skin. The maid's shadowy face twists into an eerie smirk as she holds up a spoon drenched in green slime. The baby's heart drops into her stomach as she realizes the strange color and burning heat mean one thing: this woman is trying to poison her. Check out that cartoonishly evil expression. The artist definitely wants us to despise her. Flashbacks of a terrifying shadowed emperor grin wickedly in her mind, boasting about forcing her to drink deadly poison the moment she was born. The baby catches the faint scent of potent imperial perfume lingering on the maid. Her mind races in terror as she realizes the maid plans to burn her throat with poison before presenting her corpse to the ruler. Whisper. She cries out internally, begging her to stop as the spoon inches closer. Just as the spoon touches her lips, the double doors slam open with a massive bang. A commanding voice yells out, ordering the maid to stop immediately. The baby opens her eyes in shock as figures step into the room silhouetted against a bright light. A fleeting memory of a soft, beautiful face named Fleur flashes across her mind like a gentle dream. Flowers bloom around her thoughts as the baby feels a sudden, unexplainable sense of comfort radiating from the newcomer. The suspicious maid breaks into a nervous sweat, stammering to the head maid that she was just trying to feed the shivering young lady some warm food. The head maid calmly takes the bowl, sniffs the green soup, and points out that while forest herb soup is a decent substitute when milk isn't available, this batch was boiled way too long until the taste turned sour and scalding hot. Talk about getting utterly dismantled by culinary facts. She sternly scolds the maid, reminding her that potent imperial perfumes are strictly banned and newborns have super sensitive taste buds. The careless servant bows profusely in utter embarrassment, apologizing repeatedly. Scanning the dark room, the head maid fumes, yelling that leaving the room freezing cold and pitch black will make the infant freeze to death. She reprimands the servant for her endless carelessness and orders her to go fetch a fresh batch of soup cooled to the perfect temperature right this second. She turns to the rest of the staff, loudly commanding everyone to clean up the mansion immediately. Once the servants rush off, the head maid turns around and approaches the couch with a gentle, polite bow. Looking down at the baby with soft, kind eyes, she apologizes softly for startling her with all the shouting. She gently inspects the baby's face, noticing the red mark on her cheek from the hot liquid, promising, "I'm just the language model and can't help with that." Lifting the newborn gently into her warm embrace, she explains that her parents and the entire Grand Ducal residence are in a complete panic because the twins were born way earlier than expected. She softly clarifies that due to all the chaos at the main palace, the little girl has to stay in this separate residence for just a short while. With a sweet, comforting smile, she introduces herself as Molly Misha, the head maid of the Grand Ducal residence and her personal attendant. Molly leans in with a cute sweat drop, mentioning that the Grand Duke personally ordered her to report every tiny detail about the baby's health back to him. Molly chuckles, assuming all these complex explanations are way over a newborn's head. But as the baby gazes up at her, she realizes Molly resembles the gentle Modai from her past, wondering if she's come back to life. Molly catches the baby's wide-eyed, intelligent stare and gasps, asking if the little lady actually understands every single word she's saying. The baby instantly freezes in utter panic. Sweating nervously, the baby prays to herself that her cover isn't blown already, maintaining a poker face as an adult trapped in a baby's body is top-tier comedy. Molly's eyes sparkle with excitement as she realizes the baby is super smart, declaring that she doesn't need to hold back her affection anymore. The baby freaks out, wondering what on earth she means by that. Molly buries her face into the baby's chubby cheek with a huge, affectionate kiss. The baby squints one eye in total astonishment. Molly beams with joy, explaining that the kiss was actually a special message passed down directly from her mother. The baby blinks her bright green eyes, completely baffled by what her mother could possibly mean. Molly softly whispers that her mother wanted her to know she was born after enduring and overcoming immense hardship and fear. She gently cradles the infant, reassuring her that starting from today, she will never have to suffer or endure anything alone ever again. Molly holds her tight among blooming flowers, revealing that her name is Isle Simonstusa, a name that carries a beautiful meaning in this forest, given by parents who pray for her radiant future. She nuzzles the baby tenderly, begging Lady Isle to grow up happily without a single worry or fear in her heart. Little Isle stares up in awe, repeating the words love and safety in her mind, concepts she had never experienced in her brutal previous life. She remembers how love was always a dirty lie used to manipulate her, leaving her trapped in a cycle of isolation and endless betrayal. Nestling her head against Molly's chest, Isle listens to her steady heartbeat, feeling an overwhelming warmth she never believed existed. She closes her eyes in complete bliss, feeling as though she's floating safely in a soothing, warm bath. Surrounded by glowing bubbles and soft light, her guarded heart slowly begins to melt. Staring into the tranquil blue void of her thoughts, Isle wonders if it's finally safe for her to believe in love and trust this new world. Floating in a radiant, starry void surrounded by glowing wisps of light, soft, mystical voices echo around her, telling her not to fear their love anymore. Drifted in the luminous blue aura, her soul wanders in utter confusion, asking who on earth these mysterious voices belong to. Pale, translucent hands reach through glowing crimson threads of fate, promising that through their heartfelt prayers, she will finally be granted a second chance at life. Memories fade into a gentle shower of floral petals as the reborn infant rests wrapped tightly in a soft blanket inside her maid's arms. Staring blankly at the ceiling, she wonders if a discarded person like her could truly deserve another life. Days blur into weeks as she lives a peaceful existence, spending her afternoons comfortably sucking on a baby bottle while rocking gently on a chair by the sunlit window. Under Molly's attentive care, the little golden-haired toddler learns the basic milestones of childhood, figuring out how to sit upright on her blanket with an adorable pacifier in her mouth. Look at those huge, sparkling green eyes. The artist really maxed out the cuteness stat here. Rather than playing with normal toddler toys, the sharp little girl prefers flipping through giant leather-bound magic books alongside her plush tiger toy. Pretty soon, she masters walking across the carpeted floors with tiny, cautious steps. Reflecting on her routine, she realizes she's living a completely ordinary, peaceful life for the first time ever. Deep within the Maston continent lies the sprawling Grand Ducal residence of Simondstus, surrounded by lush green valleys and pristine White Castle towers. Fast forward 3 years. Sitting isolated on a wooden garden swing surrounded by blooming white daisies, the quiet toddler hugs a thick spellbook close to her chest, lost in thought. She lets out a small breath, feeling as though she's been stuck under house arrest for 3 full years since she isn't allowed to step foot outside the estate gates. Staring at a passing white bird, she recalls from her reading that Simondstus was actually the key principality that demanded her execution back in her previous life. Talk about an awkward spawn location. Gazing up at the massive glass greenhouse looming over the garden courtyard, she bitterly wonders if the gods cursed her to endure endless misfortune. Dark crimson shadows creep across the edges of her mind as her inner monologue takes a dark turn. She grips her dress in frustration, asking fate why on earth she was reborn right inside the domain of her former mortal enemies. Examining the continent's map in her head, she notes that she wasn't born into imperial royalty, but rather as the twin daughter of the Grand Duke and Duchess of Simonustus. Yet her highborn parents have only ever glanced at her through tiny cracks in her bedroom door. Rumors throughout the domain claim her new father, Iverson Simonstis, is a renowned and noble forest mage who controls nature magic. But in her few fleeting memories of him, he always wore a bone-chilling, cold glare whenever he looked in her direction. Her mother, Grand Duchess Jen Simonstis, is celebrated across the continent as an unbeatable master swordswoman. Yet, from what little she witnessed, her mother appeared to be a frail, emotionally distant woman who couldn't show her an ounce of affection. Even though her room is piled high with lavish birthday gifts, she finds it hard to accept this quiet lifestyle, knowing Simonstis fought a brutal war against her past empire. Is it just me, or is every manhwa protagonist completely obsessed with geopolitical war history before age 4?
She closes her eyes in melancholy sigh, suspecting that no matter where she goes, she can never truly escape the bloody curse tied to her past life.
Meanwhile, 2 servants whisper behind the garden bushes, calling her a creepy mute child who got locked away in a separate mansion because she can't speak a single word. The gossiping maids spread nasty rumors that she might be an illegitimate child. Little Isle listens quietly, reflecting on how these rumors keep growing, but notes that hearing mean gossip is a million times better than being screamed at as a murderer like in her past life. Shadowy figures from her past haunt her thoughts with cruel insults, but she simply shakes them off, deciding it's far easier to just tune out the noise. A sharp, furious shout suddenly pierces through the garden air, making both gossiping servants jump out of their shoes in terror. Molly steps up with her arms tightly crossed, sternly reprimanding the maids for daring to badmouth a young lady of high noble standing. She threatens to fire them on the spot if they ever utter another disrespectful word. After shooing the snobbish servants away, Molly turns to little Ale with her hands on her hips, passionately urging her young mistress to go. I'm just a language model and can't help with that. Looking up with bright, appreciative eyes, Isle silently apologizes for making her worry and thanks Molly from the bottom of her heart for always shielding her from cruelty. Molly crouches down gently beside the swing, giving her a warm smile and reminding her that a young girl shouldn't carry so many heavy worries, before announcing they have a super important meeting scheduled for today. She winks cheerfully, revealing that her father, Lord Iverson, has explicitly asked to meet his young daughter face to face. High above, in the grand drawing room, a handsome blonde gentleman wearing elegant glasses sits stoically on a velvet couch. Hearing the news, Isle's heart jumps straight into her throat as red exclamation marks flash in her mind. Panic instantly washes over her face, panting as she screams out in disbelief that her distant father actually wants to see her. Leading her through the immaculate white corridors of the main estate, Molly softly reminds her young lady to remember all the high society etiquette lessons they practiced so she can make a great impression on both her father and the visiting doctor. Molly crouches down to smooth out the yellow dress and yellow hair bows, ensuring her little mistress looks absolutely flawless before entering. Isle trembles internally, her mind instantly flashing back to the ruthless emperor who once sat on a dark throne, calling her a useless weakling while ordering her allies to be slaughtered. She recalls the cold, blood-stained dagger dripping in his hands as he taunted her that everyone wished for her death. To her, fathers are nothing but ruthless monsters who bring destruction. Talk about heavy trauma baggage for a toddler. Seeing her young lady freeze up, Molly looks down with deep concern, gently calling out her name to snap her out of her trance. Standing tall before the grand double doors, the head of ducal guards, Trey Quinn, proudly announces the arrival of Lady Isle Siminstis and head maid Molly. Pushing her fears aside, the cute blonde toddler steps into the bright drawing room wearing her lovely pastel dress, taking small, elegant steps beside Molly. Inside the sunlit chamber, a middle-aged doctor with a brown mustache drops his teacup in surprise, turning around from his seat next to the Duke. Recovering his composure, the polite doctor places his hand over his heart and offers a warm, respectful greeting to the young lady. Ale instantly grabs the edges of her skirt and performs a perfectly poised, adorable noble curtsy. Look at that flawless execution. She completely nailed the royal etiquette on the first try. Sitting on the sofa, the blonde Duke casually greets Molly before peering over his glasses at the tiny girl. He turns his sharp green eyes toward her, raising a skeptical eyebrow while asking if this small child is really his daughter. Isle flinches under his piercing gaze, noting how intimidating, intelligent, and unapproachable he looks up close. Trembling in her tiny shoes, dark shadows surround her as she asks herself if this cold, dangerous man is really her father in this new life. The suspense thickens as she stares up at him, anxiously waiting to see how her terrifying new parent will react to her presence. Molly steps forward with a gentle, confident smile, bowing respectfully as she reassures the Duke that this adorable young girl is indisputably his true daughter. As the maid gently nudges the young princess, encouraging her to bow properly to her father, Isle tries to keep her composure, telling herself that it's just a simple bow and nothing to panic over. She gathers her tiny yellow dress with trembling hands, awkwardly performing a formal curtsy. But as she lowers her head, a sudden shock strikes her memory. She recalls how her tyrant father back in her past life looked down on her with utter disdain, mocking her for thinking a simple greeting was acceptable. Cursing her tainted status, the cruel emperor had berated her for failing to execute a flawless royal bow. He spat venomous insults, questioning who even taught her and declaring that a worthless outcast like her didn't belong anywhere near royal children. Seriously, this guy easily takes the trophy for worst dad of the year. Rain poured down heavily as the cruel monarch mercilessly kicked her head straight into the muddy soil, screaming at her to kneel and stay in the filth where she belonged. He threatened that if she didn't physically grind herself into the mud, he would slaughter every single soldier who fought beside her. He even threatened to murder her mother right in front of her eyes if she dared to defy his abusive demands. Standing in the present room, those terrifying memories flood her mind all at once, freezing her in absolute terror. Panting, unaware of the internal nightmare inside the child's mind, the maid gently prompts her again, wondering why she suddenly froze up. Desperate not to get the innocent staff punished, panic surges through Isle as she fears the Duke is about to explode in rage. Talk about severe trauma holding her hostage. Expecting a painful smack to hit her face, she cringes away and shields herself, believing nothing ever changes across lives. But instead of a harsh strike, gentle hands tenderly lift her up and seat her directly on his lap. Stunned beyond belief, baby Isle blinks her giant green eyes in complete confusion, wondering what this soft-spoken nobleman is planning. To her utter surprise, the Grand Duke speaks softly, apologizing for not communicating properly with her earlier. He explains that because she seemed so distant and guarded around him, he thought creating a warmer, friendlier environment would help her feel safe. Leaning down so their eyes meet, he asks her to look straight into his eyes. He softly encourages her to try calling him Papa or Dad. Wow, check out the wholesome character arc upgrade compared to her past life father. He reassures her that he never meant to intimidate or make her uncomfortable in any way. Seeing the genuine sorrow and affection in his eyes, Isle can hardly process how a powerful noble could look so heartbroken just over a toddler's fear. Sitting together in the sunlit room, he warmly asks if they can start fresh and try getting along better from now on. He promises that he will never force her to do anything she doesn't want to do. Isle scratches her head in utter bewilderment, wondering if this guy can somehow read her thoughts or if she's just hallucinating his sudden kindness. When he casually calls out her internal skepticism, asking if being nice is really that suspicious, Aile's mind nearly explodes. Man, this Duke is as sharp as a tack. Despite his warmth, the deep scars of her past keep her guarded. She knows she cannot bring herself to voice the forbidden word, Papa. Sensing her deep internal struggle, gently the Duke tells her that he completely understands her hesitation. Gently cradling her soft cheek in his hand, he reassures her that she never needs to wear such a pained expression again. He mentions that he already spoke with the maid Molly and plans to consult the imperial doctor regarding her vocal cord condition. With a radiant smile, he reassures her that her inability to speak will never put her life in danger under his roof. Honestly, seeing a parent actually care for her health is so refreshing. He vows that they will search high and low for a cure, but even if her voice never returns, it changes absolutely nothing to him. Surrounding her in a cocoon of unconditional love, he shows her a level of warmth she had never experienced in any lifetime. Looking directly into her eyes, he softly promises that simply having her alive and well is the greatest gift of all. Realizing that every single word coming out of his mouth is 100 genuine, Isle's icy heart begins to thaw. Yet a poignant question echoes in her thoughts, wondering why such a loving father left her alone in the nursery in the first place. Setting her down safely, the Duke sits back on the plush sofa, ready to spend quality time together. He offers a gentle suggestion, taking her on a little stroll through the grand estate.
He mentions that he knows she loves looking out from the high observation deck and suggests heading there together right away.
Taking her up to the top of the tall windmill tower, they look out over the breathtaking sunlit landscape rolling across the countryside. Gazing into the distance, the Grand Duke admits he completely sees why this scenic spot brings her peace.
Standing behind him, Tiny Isle squints her eyes, her sharp instincts warning her that this father figure might still be concealing a secret. Hold on, don't tell me he actually has a hidden dark motive after all this sweetness. Just as she questions his sudden appearance and motives, he turns around with a bright grin, asking which part of the view she loves most. Caught red-handed in her deep internal monologue, Little Isle jumps slightly in surprise. The Duke points across the horizon, asking if she prefers those dense green forests or the majestic mountain peaks towering in the distance. Little Isle pauses for a moment, quietly looking down before deciding to reveal the truth. She admits that neither the forest nor the mountains captured her interest. She reflects on how her reborn body inexplicably granted her supernaturally sharp eyesight, allowing her to see miles away with crystal clarity even at night. Because of her hawk-like vision, she loves standing on this high balcony to watch the bustling town square down below. Down in the shop window, her sharp eyes caught a discarded brown teddy bear with a chipped glass eye, sitting alone with a 30% off discount tag. Talk about microscopic vision. This girl can spot a bargain from 2 miles away. Picking up from our story, we take a look at 2 adorable stuffed bears displayed in a high-end boutique. These plushies weren't ordinary toys. They were the most ridiculously expensive luxury items in the entire shop. Crafted by a world-famous master artisan from the Ashra Binton Grand Duchy, the matching pair of teddy bears stood out like glittering gems on the top shelf. What made them truly legendary were their striking crystal eyes. Carved from an insanely rare blue dragon sapphire fossil, a tiny flame-like aura flickered inside the deep ice blue gems. Talk about flexing maximum fantasy craftsmanship on a plushie. Naturally, eager crowds crammed onto the shop floor just to catch a glimpse of the sparkling toys. But having so many people jostled together in a tight space quickly spelled trouble. The wooden display stand wobbles unstable until one bear slips over the edge. It plunges downward in midair and crashes onto the hard floor, leaving its rare gem eye cracked into pieces. Seeing his prized masterpiece damaged, the shop owner erupts in pure fury, with red veins popping on his forehead. But with such a chaotic mob of customers around, he couldn't pinpoint who actually pushed the display stand. Left with no choice, the shopkeeper placed the pristine teddy bear high up out of reach, while the damaged one was slapped with a huge discount tag and relegated to the bargain section. Sarcastic commentary time. Even with a 30% discount, who on earth buys a luxury toy with a busted eye? Little Isle bitterly reflects on how nobody wanted a defective item, feeling as though that discarded plushie perfectly mirrored her own miserable existence. She remembers staring at that single-eyed bear through the shop window on rainy days. Back then, seeing its tragic story sitting out in the cold made her feel unbearably sad. But as time passed, her perspective shifted. Every single time she looked at that window, the toy sat upright with a surprisingly proud, unbothered posture. Its remaining sapphire eye flickered like an eternal flame, silently watching the sun rise and set, regardless of how many people passed it by without a second glance. Now reincarnated into a brand new life, that memory becomes an unexpected beacon of strength. Io gazes down from the estate's observation deck, realizing that seeing a discarded toy face the world with quiet courage gave her a tiny spark of envy and hope. Squeezing her dress against the balcony railing, she sinks into quiet melancholy. She can't voice her true thoughts or explain her past life trauma, leaving her trapped in a world where no one can ever truly understand the scenery inside her heart. Suddenly, a soft hand reaches down and gently pats her golden hair. A deep, soothing voice whispers above her, softly telling her that he understands. Duke Iverson gazes down with a surprisingly tender smile, telling his daughter that she came all the way out here seeking courage and freedom. Isle freezes in complete disbelief, her eyes widening into huge glowing circles. She stammers internally, wondering how on earth this intimidating man managed to read her hidden feelings so accurately. Offering his open hand with sparkling warmth surrounding him, the Duke warmly invites Little Isle to come along so they can finally head home together. He vows from the bottom of his heart that he will protect her freedom and bravery no matter what challenges lay ahead. Flash forward to the grand journey. Ale sits bundled up in her elegant pink rose bonnet, looking thoroughly bewildered inside a massive royal carriage. She rests her tiny hand over her chest, realizing that even if she wanted to resist right now, it's already far too late to run away. Gazing down at her fancy lace dress, she broodingly reminds herself that her previous life left her with absolutely zero happy memories of having a home.
Is it just me, or does every reincarnated manhwa protagonist immediately prepare for worst-case abandonment before the carriage even leaves the driveway? She genuinely believes that even if this new family throws her away, she wouldn't even be surprised. She leans her head against the cushions, convincing herself that even if she hates this new lifestyle, nobody in the world would ever care about a useless girl like her. Huddling in her corner, she laments how she's constantly pushed around by fate without any power to change her circumstances. Suddenly, the carriage door unlatches as guards shout that they are ready to depart immediately. Isle perks up in surprise. Duke Iverson steps inside wearing his pristine white suit, offering a gentle smile as he apologizes for keeping his young daughter waiting. The moment he sits down, Isle immediately turns her head away and stares intently out the window, leaving her father sweat dropping in total awkwardness. She admits in her inner monologue that even though ignoring her father is incredibly rude, she's simply far too terrified to look at his sharp face. The blonde Duke sits back quietly, watching his incredibly timid daughter shrink as far away from him as physically possible. Adjusting his glasses, he breaks the silence by gently noting that while sitting down is safer, this is her very first time stepping outside the estate, and the world is filled with fascinating wonders. With a warm, sincere look in his eye, he reiterates that she should do whatever makes her happy, promising to protect her no matter what. Isle peeks sideways in surprise, shocked that he picked up on her silent desire to watch the passing scenery outside. She pulls back into her dress, stammering, trying hard to process why this cold man is acting so remarkably sweet toward her. Outside, the white royal carriage clatters smoothly across the paved cobblestone streets. High above the city rooftops, the grand convoy glides past bustling market stalls as little Isle travels toward a completely unknown fate. Inside the quiet cabin, Duke Iverson maintains his attentive gaze, watching his quiet daughter with subtle concern. Isle stares out at the leaves, but her mind suddenly drifts to her mother, Grand Duchess Jenth, the legendary swordswoman who was celebrated across the continent as unbeatable. In a shadowy flashback memory, a masked knight respectfully presents a box of specialized combat rations to Jin inside a dim chamber. But without warning, a terrifying slash cuts through the room, plunging the scene into absolute chaos as Jen collapses in agony. Blood splatters across the dark background as the powerful female knight cries tears of utter devastation. Visual art critique beat? Check out how masterfully the artist transitions from those dark crimson battle memories back to the Duke's melancholic face. The lighting shift is incredible. Returning to the present, Duke Iverson leans forward with a serious expression, announcing that he has something very important he wants to say to her. Isle turns around abruptly with wide, defensive eyes, making the Duke flinch in utter shock. Look at those huge emerald eyes staring him down. She's ready for war. Looking out the window to break the tension, the Duke notices a colorful building outside and asks if she's staring at the toy shop, gently asking if there's something inside she wants. Isle immediately curls her legs up onto the plush seat, hugging her knees while silently telling herself that she was merely saying a final goodbye to that single-eyed plush bear. Deep trauma triggers a terrifying flashback. In her former life, a furious maid dumped a cauldron of hot purple slush onto her while screaming dark curses, punishing her simply because she looked at a princess's pet bird. Huddled in her carriage corner, crying tears of terror, Tiny Isle shakes her head violently, convincing herself that asking for anything will only bring cruel punishment. Noticing her trembling shoulders in quiet panic, Duke Iverson suddenly shouts at the driver to stop the carriage at once. Isle gasps in total shock. Before she can react, the Duke reaches down with his large hands and gently scoops his tiny daughter up into the air, warmly asking if she'll come take a look at the shop together with him. Golden light and blooming white roses surround the frame as little Isle stares into her father's caring eyes, her guarded heart slowly realizing that this man might actually love her after all. Talk about a top-tier emotional payoff. Surrounded by brilliant blooming white roses, Duke Iverson cradles his tiny daughter with an affectionate smile, softly announcing that he has a special request for her. Little Isle freezes as her giant emerald eye sparkles in complete confusion, wondering what kind of request an all-powerful nobleman could possibly want from a toddler. The shop door swings open with a cheerful chime, welcoming the aristocratic guests into the lavish store. Visual art critique beat. Look at how fast this merchant switches into full brown-nosing mode. The shopkeeper bows excessively, eagerly offering his finest luxury items to the Grand Duke. On top of the glass counter sits the immaculate teddy bear, boasting both of its mesmerizing ice blue sapphire eyes. Isle gazes at it in awe, silently admiring its flawless beauty. Duke Iverson places his daughter high on his shoulders as they stroll through aisles stacked with expensive stuffed treats and plushies. Isle takes in the ridiculous variety, realizing every single item costs a small fortune. Manhwa trope commentary time. Is it even a reincarnated child story if the protagonist doesn't overthink every tiny breath to avoid looking uncultured? Isle nervously lowers her bonnet, telling herself not to stare too hard so no one thinks she's vulgar. Smiling warmly, the Duke asks which toy she thinks are best, suggesting they also pick out presents for her mischievous older brother and her mother. Chibi Isle panics with giant blank white circles for eyes gasp, screaming internally that she has zero clue what a mother or brother would like. Catching her flustered panic, the Duke's sweat drops in self-realization, admitting he put her in a tough spot since she hasn't met her family yet. Seriously, bless this dad for having actual emotional awareness. He gently sets little Isle down on her feet, softly reassuring her that he'll pick out the family gifts himself while she takes a breath. Giving her golden hair a fond pat, he reminds her she can head back to the carriage whenever she's tired, before following the excited shopkeeper into the back room with Maid Molly. The moment the adults disappear, Isle perks up with a determined look. Realizing this is her only chance, she trots off to say her final farewells. Speed lines highlight her focused gaze as her eyes lock onto the distant display window where the forgotten plushie sits. Sitting all alone in the bright sunlight, the single-eyed teddy bear gazes silently out at the cobblestone street. Isle cautiously approaches the wooden sill, whispering to herself that she wants to say goodbye properly so she never lives with lingering regrets. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, she steps up to face her childhood beacon of hope one last time. Storytelling critique beat. Only in Manhwa can a toddler holding a tearful conversation with a broken plushie hit this hard. Isle reaches out and gently touches the bear's furry face, softly thanking it for being there for her. Her small fingers brush against the cracked glass eye where the sapphire once shone, expressing her gratitude for its silent companionship over the years. Feeling its surprisingly soft fur under her fingertips, she thanks the toy for silently watching over her reincarnated self during her darkest days. Gazing into its remaining glowing flame sapphire eye, she admits that its fierce, unyielding look gave her a profound sense of comfort and strength. Overwhelmed by emotion, tiny Isle wraps her arms around the bear's neck, weeping soft tears as she prepares to walk away forever. She steps back and wipes her flushed face, panting, offering a heartfelt prayer that the toy's suffering ends and that someone truly loving finds it soon. A glowing flame aura flickers inside the ice blue gem as a tiny memory of smiling Isle shines inside it, wishing for the brave bear to stay healthy forever. Lowering her brimmed hat over her tear-stained eyes, she whispers a final goodbye, trying to convince herself that leaving it behind is for the best. Visual motif analysis? Check out the shattering glass artifact reflecting her tragic past memories fading away. That visual symbolism is peak storytelling. Shattered fragments of her past trauma scatter into the void as her heavy heart lets go of the past. The shop bell chimes softly above the door, marking the close of a painful chapter as she whispers that everything will be fine now. Hearing approaching footsteps, Isle drops behind a wooden counter in total panic. She rapidly wipes her eyes with her sleeves, frantically telling herself that she cannot let her father see her crying right now. Suddenly, a sleek luxury box is set down on the counter right in front of her face. Isle gasps in complete shock. Fan misdirection beat? Hold on. Don't tell me he actually bought the pristine bear instead? Inside the box sits the double-eyed teddy bear, complete with a card reading, "To my beloved child." Isle stares at the perfect bear with a bitter smile, assuming her father bought the prettiest one for his legitimate son back at the estate. Sitting politely on the display bench, she readies her heart to accept being second best once again. But without warning, Duke Iverson kneels before her with a giant smile, presenting a lush box filled with blooming roses and the single-eyed defective bear. Isle gasps. Talk about an absolute top-tier dad move. Tears well up in her massive emerald
wide-rolled eyes as she gazes at her smiling father, desperately wondering why he bought the discarded toy for her. The blonde Duke closes his eyes with a tender expression, explaining that he could tell this specific plushie was completely different from all the rest. The single blue flame sapphire shines brightly, proving that true value lies in unique strength rather than flawless perfection. Flashback detail beat? Look at how observant this dad actually is. He noticed his daughter staring longingly at the single-eyed bear the entire time they were in the shop. Leaning forward with glowing warmth, the Duke presents the single-eyed bear directly into her tiny waiting hands. Staring into the bear's flickering sapphire eye, Isle's guarded heart completely melts into overwhelming relief. She buries her flushed cheeks into her hands, crying out a joyful, tearful scream. Art texture critique? Look at how squishy the artist rendered that plush fur as her little hand sinks deep into it. You can practically feel how soft it is. Hugging the giant plushie with all her strength, sob, Isle silently thanks God and her father, overflowing with emotion as she realizes she and her beloved bear are finally together. With tears streaming down her glowing cheeks, she wonders in awe if this incredible feeling of pure happiness is truly meant for her. She wipes her tears with her sleeve, offering a silent prayer of thanks to Kyle Nishin, the legendary knight and forest protector who blessed her journey. Duke Iverson gently pulls out a pristine white silk handkerchief, smiling warmly as he tells her how happy he is that she loves her new companion. Chuckling casually, he casually mentions that the single-eyed bear cost a whopping 300,000 UDS. Isle snaps her head up in complete terror. Anime price inflation strikes again! Hugging her bear in sheer panic, Isle does the math. One bear was 150,000 and this one was 30% off. She sweats bullets, wondering if her rich dad got completely scammed by the shopkeeper. The Duke kneels down and playfully pokes her tiny finger with a soft chuckle. Looking down with deep, unconditional love, Duke Iverson reassures his young daughter that anything that brings joy to his beloved child can never be measured by money. What a wholesome conclusion! Duke Iverson beams gently, promising his daughter that if she ever desires anything in this world, he will gladly hand it to her without a second thought. Softening his gaze, he pauses hesitatingly before calling out her name, stumbling slightly over his words. Hugging her plush bear tightly against her chest, little Isle tilts her head up in quiet anticipation, wondering what her father wants to say next. He gazes out with a solemn look, acknowledging how quiet she's been since they met, while gently bringing up the lingering question of why she grew up isolated in a separate mansion. Isle's little eyes widen as he directly addresses the painful truth of why her family never visited her during those long, lonely years. Talk about top-tier parenting. Finally, a noble dad who addresses the elephant in the room instead of sweeping trauma under the rug. The Duke promises her that they will never treat her feelings or her past neglect lightly, begging her to give him holding a chance to earn her trust. He assures her that once they arrive home and meet her mother, everything will be revealed when the time is right, dramatically swearing an oath upon her single-eyed plushie to earn her trust. Deep down, Ale remembers that tragic life where she perished in agony, knowing a simple oath cannot erase past trauma. Yet something inside her guarded heart begins to shift. Feeling the warmth of a father who genuinely wants to cherish her, Isle hugs her bear tight, deciding to take a brave step forward and experience what it feels like to be a loved child. Look at how beautiful this character growth is. She's slowly breaking out of her defensive shell. Of course, her inner practical adult immediately panics over the fact that he tossed away 300,000 cash for one plushie, gasping, realizing the perfect two-eyed bear must have cost an absolute fortune. Meanwhile, Duke Iverson completely misinterprets her stunned expression, getting emotional that his sweet little daughter is already worrying about the family finances. He bursts into proud laughter, cuddling his daughter while marveling at how incredibly mature and considerate she is. Talk about an elite case of wholesome dad delusion. Gazing at the pristine two-eyed bear sitting in its sleek luxury display box with a personalized card, Isle notes how much thought went into every single item. And check this out. Back in their carriage procession, there's an entire luggage cart just loaded with mountains of wrapped presents and toys. Lifting the blanket reveals a massive box crammed full of high-end plush animals, from cute bunnies to round white creatures. It turns out the greedy merchant tried to scam the doting dad, but Molly, the head maid, stepped in like an absolute lawyer, thoroughly roasting the shopkeeper with tax laws, legal codes, and moral outrage. Molly is officially the MVP secretary. Scammer stands zero chance against a trained duchy maid. Seeing her dad smile brightly after Molly handled the extortion, Chibi Isle's sweat drops, realizing how cutthroat the adult business world really is. As the royal carriage glides through the sunlit forest paths, the Duke leans in with a secretive grin, playfully asking Isle not to mention the teddy bear gift to her brother. Meanwhile, inside the magnificent white towers of the Grand Duchy Castle, a sudden furious shout echoes through the hallways. An armored guard bows respectfully, informing the noble lady that the Duke and young lady will be arriving back at the estate within moments. Her eyes light up with pure joy as she clutches her hands, exclaiming how ecstatic she is to finally meet Isle, immediately declaring that a lavish welcome feast must be prepared. But without warning, the lady doubles over in violent pain, clutching her throat as panic erupts among the surrounding maids. Falling to her knees on the cold marble floor, her body trembles uncontrollably as violent coughing fits rack her frail frame. Blood trickles down her pale lips onto her fingers, forcing her to painfully cancel all the welcome preparations as dark shadows loom over the room. Talk about a tragic plot twist. The mother's illness is clearly way worse than anyone let on. Slumping into the darkness, the mother whispers in heartbreak that she will keep her distance to protect her daughter. On the table sits a framed family portrait with the central image torn and charred into ash, hinting at a deep, tragic secret hidden within the family line. Meanwhile, unaware of the crisis unfolding at home, the grand carriage continues its journey through the peaceful mountain valley. Inside the luxurious carriage interior, Duke Iverson points to the colorful illustrations in a fairy tale book, reading aloud about a friendly rabbit meeting magical woodland companions. Sitting comfortably in her dad's lap while clutching her teddy bear, Isle listens quietly as he finishes the tale with a gentle smile, asking if she picked it because she loves stories. Isle blinks her large eyes, confessing in her inner thoughts that she actually finds fairy tales way too childish and unrealistic for a reincarnated adult. She only selected the storybook to keep him entertained, recalling how in her violent past life, fighting was all she ever knew, leaving her completely clueless on how to play normal kids' games like chess. When you're a former battle maniac trying to act like a normal toddler, chess is basically high-stakes warfare. Seeing how thrilled her father looks just spending quality time together, she couldn't bring herself to ruin his mood, even if she originally planned to read the book by herself. Snuggling closer into his embrace, she feels an overwhelming tide of affection, finding genuine peace in the soothing cadence of his voice. Memories of a long-forgotten past flicker in her mind, reminding her of a gentle blonde woman who once read stories to her under the warm sunlight. Recalling that fleeting, beautiful memory, she realizes why she can never say no to him, silently pondering how to answer his question truthfully without breaking his heart. As the Duke waits patiently for his daughter's response, he looks down with infinite warmth in his eyes. Suddenly, a knock on the carriage door interrupts them as a guard announces their imminent arrival at the grand estate, forcing the Duke to sigh, disappointed that their story time has to end. The royal carriage pulls into the magnificent white marble courtyard of the Grand Duchy, surrounded by lush gardens and glittering fountains. Duke Iverson carries Isle out of the carriage as rows of servants bow in greeting, but little Isle immediately senses a dark, suffocating, heavy tension lingering in the courtyard. Scanning the maidservants standing in eerie, rigid silence with shadowed faces, Isle feels a chill run down her spine. Whisper, "Yikes, look at those lifeless maid faces. This went from a cozy slice of life to a horror thriller real fast." Pushing up her glasses with a stern expression, maid Tina Millard cold-heartedly announces that the welcome banquet has been abruptly canceled because the Duchess is resting. Tina passes along orders that Molly must report to the Duchess's quarters at once to handle urgent official duties, leaving Molly stunned by the sudden turn of events. Molly gently holds Isle's tiny hands, reassuring her that she will hurry back as fast as possible, before stepping away with a worried look. Looming over them with a cold, menacing glare, Tina strictly orders that Isle be confined to her room immediately, forbidding her from seeing her mother until summoned. Clutching her father's clothes tightly in sheer terror, Isle's heart shatters as she assumes her new mother and the entire estate staff despise her presence. Poor little Isle. Trauma really makes her jump to the worst possible conclusion.
Sensing her trembling fear, Duke Iverson tenderly pats her back, gently reassuring her that no one hates her, and that everyone is simply anxious about her mother's ill health. He gazes straight into her wide eyes with earnest warmth, swearing on his life that her mother loves her deeply from the bottom of her heart. Smiling softly, he promises that as soon as her mother recovers, the two of them will go visit her together. Though Isle remains skeptical inside her mind, knowing she has no power to change things either way, she quietly accepts his comfort as he holds her close. But in a shocking instant, Duke Iverson suddenly groans in agonizing pain, clutching his chest as dark corruption energy flashes through his veins. In a split second, violent emerald energy burst out from Duke Iverson's body, swirling into an uncontrollable hurricane as he clutches his chest in excruciating agony. Little Isle looks up at him in sheer confusion, wondering what on earth is happening to her father. Wild, thorny vines violently erupt from the ground, wrapping around the Duke as his wood magic completely spirals out of control. Desperate to shield his daughter, he slams his hand over Isle's eyes, roaring at Tina to take her away immediately. Without missing a beat, Tina lunges forward and grabs the child, firmly covering Isle's eyes to protect her from the terrifying magical explosion. As Tina carries her away, thorny roots seal off the hallway like an impenetrable wall. Isle's heart sinks into pitch-black despair, assuming her father just threw her off to a stranger because he realized she was a burden. Talk about instant abandonment trauma kicking in. Poor baby thinks history is repeating itself. Following behind the cold, shadowed servants, little Isle hangs her head, utterly convinced in her mind that she has been cast aside once again. Meanwhile, back in the hallway, Duke Iverson falls to his knees, sweating profusely as he slowly forces his raging magic back down. Huffs. Green vines wrap tightly around his chest as he gasps for air, realizing his suppressive medication has completely worn off, shattering the fragile balance of his wood magic. An armored guard rushes to his side in panic, asking if the Duke is all right. Leaning heavily on his loyal guard, the Duke sighs weakly, admitting he's accustomed to the pain, but laments that he won't be able to visit his daughter for a long time. Watching the maids carry her away, he silently prays she will be fine on her own. Talk about top-tier miscommunication. He's dying from mana corruption while she thinks he hates her. Tina opens the heavy doors into a spacious, sunlit bedroom filled with plush toys and luxury sofas, strictly announcing that His Grace ordered this quiet room specifically for her. Standing rigid with a stoic expression, Tina coldly informs Isle that her remaining luggage will arrive shortly, instructing her to call the door guards if she needs anything before curtly taking her leave. Glancing back over her shoulder, Isle stares at the closing doorway, half her face shrouded in heavy shadow as cold solitude creeps back in. The loud thud echoes through the empty room as Chibi Isle stands completely alone in the dim light. Look at how tiny and miserable she looks. My heart is breaking into a million pieces. Standing in the quiet room, horrific memories of her past life flash before her eyes, recalling how she rode dragons across bloody battlefields, burning her soul away for honor, only to be tossed away the moment the war ended. She remembers being thrown into a freezing, damp dungeon, bound in heavy steel chains while discarded by the very kingdom she bled to protect. The Tyrant King's mocking face twists in her mind as he snarls that no one will ever love her and that everyone despises her existence. She remembers watching her blonde companion stretch out a weak hand, whispering a heartbreaking farewell before fading into dust, leaving Isle screaming for her not to go. When past trauma is this heavy, no wonder she can't trust anyone. Images of her blindfolded comrades sacrificing themselves on the front lines flood her soul as she begs them to stop in utter desperation. One by one, her former allies collapsed into the dark abyss under horrific monster attacks, leaving her completely alone in a sea of blood. The tragic smile of her trusted knight flashes in her memory as he bids her an eternal farewell, leaving her spirit utterly destroyed. Reaching her hand out into the glowing void, she cries out in agony, gasping, asking why her precious comrades had to die and why the world betrayed her so ruthlessly. Back in the present, little Ale buries her face into the soft bed pillows, sobbing quietly into her teddy bear while pleading not to be left alone again. Suddenly, a mystical glowing aura trickles through the room as brilliant golden musical notes dance through the air. A radiant, spectral spirit wearing a holy golden crown gently sits on the edge of her bed, watching over the sleeping child. A soothing, divine warmth washes over Isle's troubled spirit, instantly melting away the freezing nightmare clinging to her heart. Snuggling deep into the blankets, her tear-stained cheeks relax into a peaceful, sweet sleep under the spirit's quiet blessing.
Inner peace settles over her mind as she whispers in her heart that she isn't alone anymore. Okay, wait. Who is this celestial mom spirit reading lullabies in the middle of the night? The lore in this manhwa is getting super deep. In her dream, she sees a peaceful vision of all her past comrades lying together in a sun-drenched floral meadow. Realizing that in the end, her sacrifices truly saved them all. Glowing celestial hands gently stroke Isle's soft blonde hair, surrounding her with unconditional maternal warmth. Beautiful white wild roses bloom brightly under the morning sun, whispering a quiet promise never to vanish again. Sunshine streams through the grand stained glass windows as little Isle slowly blinks her emerald eyes open, waking up from the most peaceful sleep she's had in years. Rubbing her sleepy eyes while sitting up in bed, she tilts her head, remembering the sweet, nostalgic lullaby that echoed in her dreams last night. A warm memory of her past party members sitting around a giant sleeping wolf while playing a wooden lute fills her thoughts, realizing it was the exact melody they used to sing to her. Nestling beneath her warm blanket, she sighs quietly, wondering why thoughts of her past life keep haunting her even inside the enemy's territory. Suddenly, the door creaks open softly as Maid Molly steps into the room with a bright, loving smile, asking if her young lady is awake. Molly apologizes sincerely, explaining that she was held up by urgent estate matters before rushing straight to Isle's side. Bending down with infinite tenderness, Molly gazes at the bundled-up toddler, warmly asking if she's feeling all right. Seeing her favorite headmaid back, Isle's eyes light up with pure joy as she kicks off her blankets and reaches her tiny arms out. Throwing herself forward with all her might, Chibi Isle leaps straight into Molly's warm embrace. Look at this adorable little leap. She went full flying squirrel mode. How can anyone handle this level of cuteness? Wrapping her tiny arms tightly around Molly's neck, Isle buries her face into her shoulder, immensely relieved that Molly didn't abandon her after all. Molly gently hugs her tight, stroking her blonde curls while whispering that they would never leave her alone, begging her to rest easy because everything is going to be all right. Unbeknownst to them, an elegant woman with long golden hair watches quietly from around the doorway corner, clutching her chest with a pained expression. Doubling over silently, the golden-haired lady suppresses a harsh cough, pressing a silk cloth to her lips before stealthily retreating into the shadowy corridor. Sensing a faint breeze, Molly turns her head toward the empty doorway, looking suspicious as if she felt someone watching them. Moments later, Molly happily finishes dressing Isle in a breathtaking pastel blue ruffled dress, holding up a golden mirror while marveling at how adorable the Duke's fashion taste is. Sitting on the velvet chair, Chibi Isle blushes slightly in her fancy dress. Molly kneels down enthusiastically, offering to take Isle on a pleasant stroll through the estate garden so the warm sunlight can showcase her cuteness to the world. But instead of agreeing, tiny Isle wobbles over to the coffee table and grabs a massive gilded leather book with both hands. Lifting the heavy tome straight above her head like a tiny weightlifter, Chibi Isle offers it up, making Molly sweat drop while laughing that her young lady wants to read another thick book already. Seriously, this baby is carrying a book heavier than her entire body, flexing those former battle maniac muscles early. Molly chuckles softly, gently proposing that they tour the grand mansion instead, but dark memories of the stoic, shadowed maid suddenly flash in Isle's mind. Hugging the heavy book against her chest, Isle lowers her head nervously, softly confessing that she doesn't want to step outside because she believes everyone hates her. Flashback memories of commoners hurling harsh insults and stones at her past self surface in her mind as she whispers that if people talk badly about her, it will make Molly sad. Molly gazes down in heartbreak, shocked by how deeply her little lady is hurting inside. Maid Molly smiles brightly, warmly recalling how much her young lady enjoys chamomile tea and eagerly proposes taking her out to visit a stunning chamomile field. Little Isle's eyes sparkle with instant wonder, her adorable cheeks blushing as the thought of a whole field of chamomile lights up her spirits. Molly winks playfully, revealing that this breathtaking hidden sanctuary exists solely within the grand territory of the Simonustus Duchy. Walking along a peaceful sunlit path, Molly leads the tiny toddler through lush green woodlands where warm breezes rustle through the trees. Chibi Isle pouts her cheeks suspiciously, flustered, embarrassed, wondering if Molly is playing a trick on her since they've been walking forever without seeing a single flower. Molly chuckles softly, reminding her that she did warn it would be a long trek. Suddenly, two estate maids carrying laundry baskets approach from around the bend, calling out respectfully to head maid Molly. Acting in the split second, Molly steps forward and shields little Isle behind her dark apron dress, casting a stern gaze at the servants. With firm authority in her voice, Molly coldly dismisses the two maids, instructing them to return to their duties while the servants bow nervously, agreeing right away. Peeking out from behind Molly's skirt, little Isle marvels at how quickly the heavy tension melts away whenever Molly is by her side. Whisper, talk about having the ultimate protective big sister aura. Molly is truly best girl material. Scooping the tiny girl into her arms, Molly offers to take a magic shortcut since her young lady isn't used to long walks, instantly sparking a glowing blue magic circle underneath her feet. Swirling gusts of azure mana surround them as Molly cradles Isle safely in her arms. Isle internally recalls that her favorite head maid is actually an incredible mage. In the blink of an eye, they teleport into a sun-drenched meadow bursting with countless glowing white chamomile flowers under a clear azure sky. Little Isle gazes out in total awe at the towering ancient tree standing proudly at the meadow's edge, gasp completely captivated by the majestic sight. Sitting amongst the dense sea of white petals, Ale takes a deep inhale, letting the soothing floral aroma fill her senses with sweet nostalgia. The comforting scent immediately triggers a vivid flashback of her past life, recalling her beloved companion Modai sitting gracefully beside her in a sun-drenched field of wild blossoms. Memories of her former knight comrade surface in her mind, remembering how he nervously offered her a wild flower while their allies giggled playfully in the background. Back in the present, Chibi Isle lets out a heavy, bittersweet sigh, weighed down by these deep sentimental memories. Okay, seriously? Why does every peaceful moment in this manhwa gotta trigger tragic past life flashback? Give this poor baby a break. Noticing her young lady's solemn expression, Molly kneels down, gently suggesting they offer a prayer to Kyle, the sacred lord of the forest, to lift her weary spirits. Molly guides her toward an ancient winged stone monument, the divine statue of Kanna, the ruler of the forest, who hears every earnest prayer whispered in these woods. Historical lore records detail how after the creation goddess Tia created the realm, she fell into an eternal slumber, leaving the land split into distinct regions governed by 4 holy knights and 4 elemental mages. Kanna was one of those legendary oracle knights who ruled the wild forest, celebrated across history for her infinite compassion toward anyone suffering in pain. Gazing up at the weathered stone statue, Chibi Isle clutches her chest, whisper, convinced that as a person cursed by the gods, no divine blessing will ever reach her. Yet she still folds her tiny hands together. Closing her eyes tightly, little Isle begins her quiet, solemn request to the forest goddess. Kneeling on the soft grass with her tiny hands held close to her chest, she offers up a deeply selfless prayer to the heavens. She prays for all the creatures living in the forest and specifically asks for blessings upon her father who pours so much love into her, wishing for genuine happiness to find his heart. She even prays for her birth mother who grew frail after bringing her into the world, earnestly asking the goddess to restore her mother's health as fast as possible. Isle whispers from the absolute bottom of her soul that she never wants anyone to become miserable or hurt because of her presence. Tear droplets glisten on her eyelashes as she prays for the joy of those who love others. Suddenly, a large, warm hand reaches down and gently rests on her head. Duke Iverson kneels right behind her, softly assuring his daughter that the goddess has heard her selfless prayer and promises to grant all her wishes. Gazing down at his tiny princess surrounded by floating light particles, the Duke lovingly reassures her that the goddess and everyone living in this forest truly treasure her. Chibi Isle glances back at the stone statue over her shoulder, internally suspecting her dad is just making up sweet words to cheer her up. Pouting her cheeks adorably, she thinks about how unreliable he is for vanishing during his magic overload only to pop back up out of nowhere, when suddenly the Duke lowers his head in deep remorse. With a pained, sorrowful expression, the Duke sits in the flowers and admits it was entirely his fault for making her feel abandoned, begging his little girl for forgiveness. Chibi Isle tilts her head in quiet surprise, listening attentively as her father begins to reveal the painful truth behind his sudden disappearance. The Duke admits that he suffered a horrific magical wound in his youth, causing his wood magic to spiral out of control whenever his suppressive medication wears off. And during their sweet journey home, he was so distracted by her cuteness that he completely forgot to take his medicine. Wild surges of bright green mana flash around him as he explains that when his power breaks loose, he turns into a terrifying monster, forcing him to send her away with the maids to keep her safe from harm. Pressing his hand against his chest, the Duke looks at her with overwhelming guilt, begging for her forgiveness for failing to explain properly and causing her so much heartache. Realizing how excruciating it must be to have one's own magic go berserk, little Isle's heart melts as she realizes her father was enduring unimaginable pain just to shield her from danger. Standing together before the holy monument, the Duke offers a warm smile, explaining that her prayers to Lady Canna helped him recover, encouraging her to speak her mind and be as demanding as she wants with him. Gently stroking her soft golden hair, the Duke gives her the most tender, beaming smile, promising that from now on, they will spend every single day side by side. The Duke sits beside her in the blooming field, warmly asking if she'd like to join him for a cup of sweet tea that Molly prepared at the nearby pavilion. But instead of answering, Chibi Isles suddenly turns around and starts waddling through the grass on her tiny toddler feet. Look at those tiny baby steps go. She is setting her own pace and taking 0 orders today. The Duke gapes in total astonishment, looking completely bewildered as his tiny daughter toddles across the flower field. Taking careful, deliberate steps through the daisies, little Isle looks back over her shoulder, giggle, silently inviting her father to follow her lead. Walking beneath the open blue sky, the Grand Duke obediently trails behind his tiny toddler across the rolling hills of chamomile blossoms. Maid Molly stands outside a white marble gazebo, bowing gracefully as she announces that fresh tea and delicious pastries are ready for both of them.
Sitting at the elegant garden table piled high with fruit tarts and pastries, the Duke leans forward enthusiastically, asking what fun games she would like to play today.
Chibi Isle holds her teacup, internally thinking she just wanted to sit quietly and read a massive book, while her father wildly lists off horseback riding, chess, building blocks, drawing, fishing, and playing with dolls. Seeing her confused expression, the Duke triumphantly proposes using an ancient floral fortune-telling spell to let the forest goddess pick her afternoon activity. Flashes of radiant magic mana burst into the air as a glowing flower spins dramatically in midair, leaving little Ale sweat-dropping in utter disbelief at her dad's extra-theatrical magic tricks. Talk about using high-tier archmage magic just to decide on a toddler playtime activity. Leaning over the table with a sleek silver spoon, the Duke warmly points out that if they happen to finish early today, he will personally take her to the Grand Duchy's main library. He boasts with a playful giggle in his eye that it happens to be the grandest sanctuary of knowledge in the entire domain. Clapping his hands together with a brisk snap, the Duke cheerfully suggests setting up a lavish doll tea party right here on the grass. He looks over his shoulder and calls out, prompting a full contingent of heavily armored knights and formal housemaids, all holding stuffed animal plushies to respond in unison.
Chibi Isle clutches her tiny hands nervously, casting a suspicious glance at the crowd. She internally panics, recognizing these imposing servants as the exact same terrifying guards who glared at her yesterday, leaving her wondering what wild performance they're about to pull off. Lowering himself onto one knee, the Duke looks into his daughter's eyes with profound tenderness. He softly reveals that her mother and he spent hours organizing this silly theatrical game just to give her a proper warm welcome, assuring her that every person present genuinely cares about her. A vibrant storybook illustration unfolds, narrating the tale of a magical woodland where 4 happy companions, a cheerful cat, a brave wolf, a gentle tree spirit, and a tiny rabbit princess, all live together in total harmony. Suddenly, a dramatic shadow falls across the forest as a towering demon king figure emerges with outstretched claws. The dark entity lets out a booming, villainous chuckle, declaring that every creature in the woods will be dragged into endless shadow to serve as his mindless slaves. Refusing to let her friends suffer, the brave rabbit princess charges directly into battle alone, only to be overwhelmed by the dark sorcery and swept into the shadowy fortress. Her tiny wooden blade drops onto the damp ground with a loud clatter as the curse takes hold. Trapped beneath the sinister apparition, the rabbit princess hangs her head in utter despair, while the villain sneers that her allies have completely abandoned her. Watching the play from her tiny chair, little Isle squeezes her teddy bear tightly, feeling a sudden wave of genuine heartache wash over her chest. Seriously, why does every simple kid play turn into an intense psychological drama in this manner? The narrator's voice swells with triumph as the story reveals that the princess had secretly planted a seed of courage within her loyal friends. Unshaken by fear, the cat, the wolf, and the tree spirit raise their miniature weapons into the air, determined to storm the dark palace and rescue their leader. Explaining how the brave trio sought out the formidable bear knight, the real-life maids and guards dramatically drop onto their knees surrounding Chibi Isle's high chair. Holding their stuffed plushies up toward her teddy bear, they passionately beg Sir Bear Knight to grant them the strength needed to save the kingdom.
Maid Tina holds up a cute orange Pat plushie, sweetly inviting the tiny lady to participate in the performance. Chibi Isle sweat drops on the spot, looking completely stunned as she wonders what role a 2-year-old toddler is even supposed to play in this high-stakes puppet opera. Scooping up the stuffed teddy bear, the Grand Duke adopts a deeply theatrical archmage voice, proclaiming to the forest creatures that he has heard their desperate cries and will bestow his supreme blessing upon their noble quest. Brilliant blue light flares from the bear's glass eye as a magical aura swirls around the puppet. The Duke commands the brave squad to unleash their newly granted power and shatter the Demon King's curse once and for all. Shouting a fierce battle cry, the plushie-wielding companions leap into action, driving back the darkness. Little Isle gazes up with wide, shimmering eyes as the narrator announces the glorious victory and the rescue of the beloved rabbit princess. The guard playing the Demon King dramatically flops backward into the grass, groaning in defeat, while the entire manor staff strikes a majestic victory pose. Honestly, watching high-ranking Imperial guards in full plate armor act out a toddler play with plushies is pure peak comedy. Holding up the white rabbit plush with a radiant smile, the Duke asks his tiny daughter if she enjoyed the magical story. Chibi Isle sits frozen in place, staring at the cheerful crowd while wondering if she's somehow trapped inside a bizarre, dreamlike hallucination.
Flashes of shadowy, stern faces from yesterday cross her mind, shivering, remembering how terrified she felt around these exact same servants when she first arrived at the estate.
Comparing their former icy glares to their current eager smiles, she marvels at how drastically the entire atmosphere of the duchy transformed overnight. Squeezing her plushie against her cheek, Little Isle feels a genuinely cozy warmth bloom in her heart. The Duke gently kneels beside her, confessing that yesterday he was so frantic over her mother's poor health that he failed to pay attention to her, but spent the entire night setting up the surprise to make it right. The Duke introduces headmaid Tina, explaining that she has faithfully served the Grand Duchy since her grandfather's era. He clarifies that when his magic went berserk yesterday, Tina was simply following strict orders to separate them to ensure Isle remained completely safe from harm. Stepping forward with a respectful bow, Tina gazes down at the tiny girl with immense affection, softly explaining her actions. She assures Little Isle that the entire household has heard how delicate and sweet she is, promising from the bottom of her heart that every servant truly adores her. Looking around the sunlit lawn, Isle sees all the maids and knights bowing humbly before her tiny chair, awaiting her reaction with earnest anticipation. Chibi Isle blinks her bright green eyes, completely touched by the overwhelming sincerity radiating from everyone around her. Lowering her gaze softly, Little Isle murmurs her gratitude, admitting that while her tragic past makes it difficult for her to open her heart to people, she truly wants to cherish the love they are giving her. The Duke watches her with quiet, proud emotion. Maid Molly smiles warmly at the Duke, happy to see the cold barrier surrounding the young lady finally begin to melt away. Swooping Isle up into his arms with a triumphant laugh, the Duke suddenly points a finger toward the sky, enthusiastically declaring that their next exciting outdoor activity will be a grand fishing trip down by the river. As they head toward the water, Little Isle suddenly glances back over her shoulder. Peeking out from behind a massive oak tree, a mysterious golden hem of a dress rustles in the breeze, catching the sharp toddler's immediate attention. Arriving at a picturesque riverbank shaded by massive white silk parasols, a handsome knight steps forward, presenting a wide array of specialized fishing rods for the young lady to test out. An entire squad of armored guards stands lined up in military formation, dramatically holding up fishing poles like holy spears. Meanwhile, a maid offers a tray of freshly squeezed fruit cocktails to keep the tiny princess hydrated under the afternoon sun. 3 distinct maids step forward holding fancy handmade beverages, dessert bowls, and chilled smoothies, begging the young lady to pick her favorite snack before they begin. Headmaid Tina pushes forward a massive spread, including glass aquariums, heavy metal buckets, portable campfires, and a fully equipped master chef holding a giant spatula, announcing that they are prepared to either keep or catch as pets or grill them instantly on the spot. Completely overwhelmed by the excessive multi-department preparation for a simple fishing trip, Chibi Isle's sweat drops profusely, internally wishing she could just transform into a tiny fish and escape into the quiet river depths. You gotta love how this entire duchy treats a basic toddler outing like a full-scale military campaign. Satisfied with the setup, the Duke warmly dismisses the extra servants, instructing everyone except headmaid Molly to return to the manor, so Ale can enjoy some peace. The staff bows respectfully before filing away, leaving little Alil sitting on a plush garden chair holding a tiny wooden fishing pole. She lets out a weary breath, thinking back to her past life where she only commanded soldiers, finding this intense civilian enthusiasm genuinely exhausting.
Staring down at the shimmering blue water reflection, her mind wanders as she imagines sinking softly beneath the surface where everything is quiet, dark, and peaceful. The Duke gently leans down over her shoulder, placing his large hands over her tiny fingers to guide her fishing line. Isla blinks back to reality, realizing she was totally drifting off into her own head. Sitting back in his chair, the Duke notices her distant gaze and gently asks if she dislikes fishing. Isla looks down at the schooling fish beneath the water, quietly admitting that she doesn't hate the sport itself. It's the actual fish she can't stand. Watching the dark silhouettes of aquatic creatures darting through the riverbed, painful memories from her previous life start rising to the surface, reminding her of agonizing moments she spent starving in the freezing cold. A vivid flashback grips her mind. A pale, barefoot child stands shivering in knee-deep icy water holding a crude pitchfork, while cruel royal guards shout down from the snowy bank, warning her that the king ordered her not to return until she catches food, disgusted, throwing buckets of rotten fish at her feet. Exhausted and battered, the child lies motionless on the wet shore beside a giant dead sea monster, clutching a wooden sword with trembling hands. In the present, Chibi Isle clutches her tiny dress, remembering how fish always meant humiliation and agony in her past existence. Unaware of her dark flashback, the Duke smiles nostalgically, recounting how he used to go fishing with her mother, laughing about how her mother grew so furious at not catching anything that she drew her longsword and tried to slay the fish by hand while he begged her to calm down. Looking down at his daughter with glowing warmth, the Duke gently explains that even when life feels agonizing or bleak, tackling those difficult moments alongside someone you love can turn the hardest days into wonderful memories. He leans in closer, giving her a soft, meaningful gaze as he asks if she understands the deeper message he's trying to pass down to her. Suddenly, the fishing line yanks violently as a massive fish bites the hook. But as the water sprays into the air, the intense splash instantly triggers another terrifying traumatic flashback in Isle's mind. Images of her past life's final battle flash violently across her vision, flames consuming the battlefield, blood dripping from her blade, and the lifeless bodies of her fallen comrades lying scattered on the scorched earth. She clutches her aching chest in total agony. Unable to handle the overwhelming mental pressure, Chibi Isle drops her fishing pole and hurriedly waddles away across the grass, desperately wanting to be alone. The Duke's eyes widen in shock as he reaches out, firmly grabbing her tidy wrist to stop her. Turning around with tears brimming in her eyes, little Isle angrily demands that he let her go. Flustered, embarrassed, the Duke looks down at her fierce expression in total bewilderment, asking if she is actually angry at him, causing Isle to freeze in utter shock. Feeling guilty for losing her temper, Isle lowers her head, preparing to apologize for her rude behavior. Gasp! When suddenly, the Duke scoops her high into the air with a beaming, overjoyed smile, exclaiming that he is absolutely thrilled to see his daughter express real anger. Hugging her tightly against his chest, the Duke tenderly kisses her forehead, instantly agreeing to cancel the fishing trip and take her straight to the library instead. Chibi Isle blinks in total disbelief, completely bewildered by how her dad reacted to her anger with pure adoration instead of harsh punishment. Cradling his precious princess in his arms as they walk through the sunlit meadow, the Duke softly promises that from this day forward, she can think whatever she wants and do whatever she desires, because her complete freedom and happiness mean everything to him. Leaning down closer, the Duke gently emphasizes that freedom isn't just about doing whatever she pleases. It's also having the right to refuse things she dislikes, softly noting how often she restrains her true feelings. Cradling her gently against his shoulder, he beams with proud joy, celebrating the fact that she's finally expressing her authentic emotions after hiding behind a cold mask for so long. Honestly, watching a feared Grand Duke celebrate his daughter throwing a tiny toddler tantrum as major emotional progress is equal parts hilarious and adorable. The Duke suddenly twirls her around in a dizzying celebratory hug before catching himself with an embarrassed cough, while Chibi Isle deadpans internally, wondering if her brand new father genuinely needs psychiatric medication. Walking along the manicure lawn, little Isle suddenly pauses, her vivid green eyes widening as that same spine-chilling sensation of being watched creeps over her skin once again. Glancing subtly back toward the tree line, she notices a glint of golden fabric fluttering behind a massive oak trunk, realizing someone has been tracking their exact movements from the shadows. Though the hidden aura doesn't feel overtly hostile, being monitored in secret keeps her former commander instincts on high alert, even as the oblivious Duke and maid stroll ahead without noticing a thing. You'd think a high-security Grand Duchy crawling with elite knights would catch a mystery intruder standing behind a tree, but I guess everybody's too distracted by cute Chibi
Isle. Pushing open two massive mahogany double doors, the Duke unveils his personal sanctuary, a grand interior that leaves the tiny girl completely breathless. Standing on a high marble balcony, little Isle gazes out at a breathtaking two-story library stretching as far as the eye can see, packed with endless towering bookshelves and soft sunlight streaming through giant stained glass windows. As they descend the spiral staircase, the Duke proudly boasts about the library's massive collection, while Isle gently kneels beside a stack of old hardcovers, remembering how her former nanny first taught her how to read back in her original life. Hugging a heavy leather-bound tome against her chest, her mind wanders back to her tragic past, recalling how she kept studying enemy intel mid-war after her nanny passed away, finding solace in quiet books whenever she had a rare moment of peace. Look at that artistic lighting cascading across the pages. The artist really cooked with this cozy atmospheric panel. Seeing her tender expression, the Duke warmly grants her total access to his private sanctuary, giggled jokingly warning her not to fall asleep on the cold wooden floor lest she catch a chill. Walking toward the exit, he explains that this restricted wing is off-limits to normal servants without his explicit permission, promising to order some fresh snacks for her while she reads. He turns back with a gentle smile, telling her politely to wait patiently for his return if she needs anything, prompting Chibi Isle to nod along with wide, innocent eyes. Left completely alone in the echoing silence, little Isle sets aside the casual storybooks, her expression hardening as her real mission begins. She desperately needs to search for texts detailing reincarnation and the infamous blood curse. Scanning the bottom shelves with a focused gaze, she questions whether the ancient curse still lingers within her soul, desperate to uncover why she was reborn inside the exact territory of her former enemy nation. Browsing through endless rows of historical archives, she suddenly frowns in total confusion, realizing that despite the massive size of this ducal library, every single book on lost magic and curses is miraculously missing. Figuring that hidden, forbidden knowledge must be stored near the top ceiling, the ambitious toddler grips the edge of a tall wooden ladder and begins hauling her tiny body upward. But as her small shoe slips on the polished step, her grip fails, sending her plummeting backward off the ladder. Swooping in out of nowhere, the Duke catches her safely in his arms with instantaneous reflexes, letting out a relieved breath as he notes she would have taken a nasty spill. Little Isle blinks in astonishment, amazed that he didn't scold her for climbing high shelves, while the Duke innocently glances at the book in her hand, asking if she's interested in romantic historical novels. Holding up the illustrated cover, the Duke playfully suggests that mature romance novels might be a bit too advanced for a toddler, leaving Chibi Isle sweating profusely at his total misunderstanding. Can we talk about how hilarious it is that the Duke thinks his reincarnated warrior daughter is secretly sneaking around trying to read spicy romance novels? Lowering his playful tone, the Duke's gaze shifts to a grave, serious intensity as he directly reveals that if she's looking for records on reincarnation or the blood curse, she won't find a single word in this room. Isle gasps, stunned by his sudden insight, as he reveals that Imperial agents invaded the duchy long ago, confiscating and incinerating every single document related to those forbidden subjects. Shadows framing his sharp facial features, the Duke's expression darkens into pure, cold disgust as he prepares to expose the horrific truth behind her birth. As a heavy, tense silence settles over the massive library, the grim history of the Empire's dark secrets begins to unfurl. Flashback images illuminate the darkness as the Duke recounts how 3 years ago, while her mother was heavily pregnant with Isle, the Imperial army staged an unprovoked raid on the Grand Duchy. Imperial soldiers ransacked every library across the realm, throwing stacks of ancient magical texts into roaring bonfires to erase all knowledge of the blood curse from existence. Armed knights hunted down every pregnant woman across the territory, terrorizing Isle's mother so severely that the overwhelming fear threw her into sudden premature labor. Even as her mother lay in agony during childbirth, the Emperor dispatched a cold special envoy to monitor the room, demanding to inspect the newborn instantly so they could abduct any infant girl on the spot. With the main ducal knights away fighting ice monsters on the northern front and the Duke losing control over his raging magic, they were forced to publicly lie, falsely announcing that a son was born while hiding their tiny daughter in complete secrecy. Tenderly resting his hand on her head, the Duke confesses that his heart bled every single day for 2 long years, only able to see her face during secret midnight deliveries under relentless imperial surveillance. Listening to his agonizing story, little Io lowers her head in total shock, realizing that the newborn baby girl hunted by the brutal empire was actually her. Painful memories from her past life flash violently across her mind, remembering how the tyrannical emperor sneered down at her bloody chains, cursing her to inherit the royal bloodline even if she were ever reborn. Clutching her aching chest with trembling hands, little Io drowns in sudden guilt, horrified by the thought that her mere existence brings misfortune to everyone around her. Tears brim in her wide green eyes as she looks up at her father, feeling deeply undeserving of a loving family who suffered so much trauma just to protect a cursed child. Gently cupping her tear-stained cheek, the Duke firmly cuts off her negative thoughts, passionately declaring that she is their precious, irreplaceable daughter who deserves all the love in the world. Holding her close against his chest, he reassures her that those dark, terrifying days are officially over, swearing on his life that the Grand Duchy is fully prepared to defend her against any threat. Gently wiping a tear from her cheek, the Duke smiles warmly, explaining that the Grand Duchy's power has completely recovered, and more importantly, the tyrannical Emperor Krita II, who was obsessed with hunting young girls, has finally met a gruesome, bloody death on his throne. Little Io's eyes widen in total shock at the unexpected news. Talk about poetic justice. That miserable old tyrant finally kicked the bucket, and honestly, nobody is shedding a single tear for him. The Duke explains that the internal power struggle over the imperial throne forced all factions to stop hunting newborn girls to regain the favor of noble duchies, while powerful alliances have formed to keep the empire in check. Io gazes up at him in awe as he passionately vows that no parent in this household would ever dream of abandoning their precious child. Holding her tiny hands, he softly confesses how agonizing it was to be separated from her for even a single second, explaining why he rushed to bring her home the instant the political danger subsided. Scooping her up into his arms, he mentions that her mother desperately wants to publicly announce her existence to the entire realm as soon as her fragile health improves. Restability settling over her mind, little Io leans against his shoulder, feeling a strange mixture of immense warmth at having a family that truly loves her, alongside an unspoken sorrow from her past life. Glancing into the void of her memories, she watches the fading image of her past self bound in red magic, wondering if the terrifying blood curse will ever wake up to torment her again. Wrapped in dark metaphorical chains, she worries that if the curse takes over, she might end up hurting the very people who love her. Yet looking down at her father's gentle smile, she realizes she is finally ready to trust him. Looking up into his soft green eyes, little Io gathers her courage, deciding that maybe, just maybe, it's safe to open up and ask him directly about the blood curse. But before she can speak, the Duke gently places a finger over his lips with a playful smirk, shushing her by announcing that he's far too exhausted to discuss heavy topics today. Hoisting her up onto his broad shoulder with a cheerful laugh, he declares that eating a proper meal takes top priority, leaving Chibi Io letting out a heavy, flustered breath at her dad's hilarious emotional dodge. Sitting all by herself at the far end of an absurdly massive royal dining table, tiny Io stares blankly at her solitary plate while a maid stands at attention. You gotta love Manhwa logic. Giving a tiny toddler a dining table the size of a bowling alley is peak aristocratic comedy. Looking down at the sprawling royal feast arranged on her table, little Io sits in complete silence as the maid serves her warm tea, gently noting how downcast the young mistress appears despite this being her welcome back meal. The maid admits that if the royal chef saw her unenthusiastic expression, he'd be crushed, while Chibi Io internally freaks out over the absurd mountain of food. Suddenly, a sharp tingling sensation prickles the back of her neck as she turns her head toward the garden balcony. Narrowing her eyes, little Io instantly senses a powerful, watchful gaze fixed directly onto her from the shadows outside. Realizing this isn't just a random occurrence, little Io leaps right off her chair without warning. She grumps to herself that this makes 3 separate times someone has been creeping on her, snarls, swearing to hunt down the intruder herself while her maid frantically calls after her leftover dinner. Dashing outside into the lush estate garden, little Al catches a glimpse of a mysterious woman fleeing through the bushes. She huffs in frustration as her clumsy toddler legs fail to keep pace with the nimble intruder, panting, causing her small shoe to snag on a sharp stone. Losing her balance completely, little Io tumbles toward the dirt. But just before she hits the ground, a soft, urgent voice calls out as delicate hands swoop in to safely gather her into a warm embrace. Looking up in utter astonishment, little Io locks eyes with a
breathtaking golden-haired beauty wearing an elegant white gown. As the mysterious woman gently asks if she can stand on her own, little Isle is left completely spellbound by her angelic features, desperately wondering who this mysterious lady could possibly be. A heavy, silent pause hangs in the garden breeze as the two of them stare at each other in total stillness. Honestly, the artist went so hard on this breathtaking lighting panel. The soft sunlight filtering through the leaves makes this look straight out of a high-budget anime movie. Before little Isle can utter a word, Maid Molly's frantic voice echoes through the trees. Hearing her servant rushing closer, little Isle briefly glances back over her shoulder to respond. But when she turns back around a split second later, the mysterious blonde lady has completely vanished without leaving a single trace. Maid Molly hurries up out of breath, panting, asking what happened, leaving little Isle blinking in utter bewilderment at the empty bushes. Brushing off the incident, little Isle reasons that the mystery woman didn't feel malicious, deciding it's best not to worry too much as her maid gently takes her hand to guide her back inside for a reheated dinner. Hidden behind a thick tree trunk, the blonde woman presses her hands against her chest, her amber eyes brimming with profound emotion as she tearfully whispers how deeply thankful she is that her precious child has finally returned home. Later that night, as darkness wraps around the grand castle towers, Maid Molly tucks little Isle into her massive canopy bed, reminding her to ring the bedside bell if she needs anything before bidding her a warm goodnight. As the heavy bedroom door clicks shut, a quiet, dim atmosphere settles over the expansive chamber. Snuggling under the cozy covers, little Isle lets out a long exhalation, reflecting on the chaotic whirlwind of events that unfolded throughout the day. Yet, despite her cozy surroundings, her mind remains troubled by the haunting threat of the blood curse, knowing she must uncover its secrets at all costs. As sleep takes hold of her, little Isle slips into a vivid, icy nightmare, watching snow fall heavily over a grim fortress, wondering if the figure in her dream is her mother from her tragic past life. Suddenly, the vision shifts violently as a harsh, white-haired woman shoves a small, shivering girl down into the freezing snow, screaming at her to shut up. Painful memories resurface with brutal clarity as the cruel mother forcibly pours a glowing, toxic potion down the crying child's throat. The desperate child pleads for mercy, but the wicked woman coldly sneers that drinking the failed magic potion is her only worth, leaving the poor girl gasping, panting as poisonous energy burns through her veins. Collapsing onto the frozen earth, the tortured child writhes in agony as dark, corrupted curse marks spread rapidly across her pale skin. Curled up in the suffocating abyss of her past memories, little Isle groans in phantom pain, remembering how her throat burned like liquid fire while her corrupted blood vessels tore themselves apart. Is it just me, or does every reincarnated manhwa protagonist have the most traumatic backstory imaginable? Suddenly, the dark nightmare fades away as a soothing, gentle voice softly hums a comforting lullaby about a pure goddess scattering stars, while delicate, warm hands gently stroke her sleeping face. Opening her eyes with a startled gasp, little Isle breaks free from her nightmare. Sitting right beside her on the mattress in the dim candlelight is the very same gorgeous golden-haired woman from the garden, wearing a military coat over her nightdress. Staring up at her in shock, little Isle instantly recognizes her as the mystery stalker who was watching her earlier in the afternoon. Realizing that little Isle is wide awake and staring directly at her, the blonde woman gasps, in panic, losing her balance and tumbling off the side of the high bed. She lands flat on her back with a comical flop, sending her military coat flying as she lies motionless on the carpet. Talk about an epic failed stealth entry. This majestic lady just pulled off the most clumsy ninja escape in royal history. Hearing the loud disturbance, Maid Molly bursts through the bedroom doors carrying a lit lantern, calling out an alarm to check on her young mistress. Inside the room, the beautiful woman remains collapsed on the floor, hiding her bright red face behind her hands in absolute embarrassment while little Isle stares from the bed in total confusion. Sweating profusely as she inspects the clumsy intruder, Maid Molly gasps in total disbelief, recognizing the golden crest pin on the coat and timidly calling out to the Grand Duchess. As the quiet moonlight shines over the sleeping estate, a hilariously awkward situation unfolds inside the young lady's private quarters. Sometime later, the grand chamber is fully illuminated as the Grand Duchess sits stiffly on a luxurious couch, accompanied by her senior head maid, while little Isle sits on her bed clutching a plush teddy bear. Hugging her teddy bear tight against her chest, little Isle observes her stooped mother with wide, cautious eyes while Maid Molly stands nervously beside the bed. Sitting with impeccable posture, the Grand Duchess maintains a cold, sharp gaze, looking remarkably intense and commanding despite wearing casual loungewear.
Internalizing the situation, little Isle puts the pieces together, realizing that this strikingly handsome woman sitting across from her is indeed her birth mother in this new life.
Remembering everything her father explained earlier, little Isle knows her mother harbors no actual malice toward her. Yet an awkward wall of tension still lingers in the air. Flashback memories cross little Isle's mind, recalling how the stern head maid previously restricted access to her room, leaving her wondering if her mother intentionally avoided her due to her frail health, despite constantly watching from afar. Images of the blonde lady watching silently from behind the garden trees flickered through her thoughts, alongside the mysterious ghostly silhouette who sneaked into her room at night to sing sweet lullabies, only to vanish into thin air whenever they crossed paths during the day. Clenching her tiny fist, little Isle narrows her eyes in frustration, desperately trying to figure out what her mysterious mother actually wants from her. Crossing her arms with an intimidating stance, the Grand Duchess suddenly steps closer to the bed, fixing a sharp, intense glare directly onto the tiny toddler. In a sharp, blunt tone, the Grand Duchess speaks up, telling little Isle that since she's been staring so intently, she should just speak up if she has something to say. But before little Isle can even process the command, the Duchess suddenly blinks in realization, nonchalantly muttering that she completely forgot her toddler daughter can't even speak yet. Resting her chin on her hand with a cool, unbothered expression, the Duchess looks down at her child while Chibi Eily sweats profusely behind her teddy bear. Can we talk about how hilariously blunt this mother is? She really just hit her toddler daughter with the ultimate cold reality check. Sensing the heavy, awkward energy suffocating the room, Maid Molly glances nervously between the two, while little Isle buries her face deeper into her plush toy. Senior Maid Tina sweat drops, softly intervening to gently scold the Grand Duchess for being far too harsh and careless with her phrasing toward a young child. Looking completely bewildered, the Grand Duchess tilts her head in confusion, innocently asking if she said something weird, while little Isle recoils in terror. Trembling with intense anxiety, little Isle internally panics, wondering why every single mother in both her past and present life has to be so terrifyingly intense. Trying to fix her blunder, the Grand Duchess reaches out her hand toward the bed, telling her daughter to look at her properly. But misinterpreting the gesture, traumatized little Isle ducks under her blanket, convincing herself she just needs to endure incoming punishment. As little Isle hides tightly under her covers, the Grand Duchess freezes in place, looking deeply hurt and rejected by her daughter's fearful reaction, before huffing in tsundere frustration. Turning away with a defensive pout, the Grand Duchess huffs that it doesn't matter anyway since the kid can't talk, ordering Tina to leave the room with her. As the heavy bedroom door slams shut, Maid Molly gently unrolls the blanket burrito, warmly reassuring the trembling toddler that her mother truly means no harm. Traumatized by the vivid nightmare of her past life, little Isle refuses to believe her current reality, unable to erase the horrifying memory of her former mother forcing dark, toxic potions down her throat. The haunting flashback of being abused and chained in her previous life fills her heart with suffocating dread, leaving her shivering tightly in Maid Molly's gentle embrace. Outside in the quiet moonlit corridor, the Grand Duchess slowly walks alongside her senior headmaid Tina, her heart heavy with deep regret after fleeing her daughter's bedroom. Clasping her trembling hands together, the blonde beauty stammers nervously, confessing to Tina that she only snuck into Isle's quarters because she heard her having a terrible nightmare and desperately wanted to comfort her. Overwhelmed by intense guilt, the Grand Duchess tears up, berating herself for terrifying her fragile toddler when all she wanted was to hold her in her arms. Is it just me, or is this intimidating magic knight secretly the biggest softie in the entire kingdom? She buries her face in her hands with a heavy exhalation, convinced that her awkward stoicism and blunt tone ruined any chance of ever connecting with her precious baby girl. Suddenly staggering mid-step, the Duchess lets out a quiet gasp, nearly losing her footing on the cold marble floor as Tina quickly catches her. Leaning heavily against her headmaid, the Duchess sheepishly admits that she sprained her ankle during her embarrassing bed-tumbling escape earlier. Talk about adding physical injury to emotional damage. She really paid a steep price for that clumsy stealth entry. As dawn breaks across the grand estate, soft morning sunlight filters through the blooming garden branches, signaling the arrival of a new day. Inside the master suite, Tina carefully examines her injured foot while the handsome Duke bursts through the doors in a panic, having heard about her middle-of-the-night disaster. Meanwhile, Molly quips in the background that if the kingdom's news tabloids ever found out the Grand Duchess sprained her ankle peeking at her toddler, it would become a massive viral headline. Turning bright
red, the flustered Duchess hugs her knees on the couch, angrily telling her husband not to exaggerate a simple ankle sprain. Seeing her adorable blushing reaction, the Duke and both maids break into sly smirks, giggling together at how hopelessly smitten she is with her little daughter. Puffing her cheeks in full tsundere frustration, the embarrassed Duchess frantically demands that everyone stop making fun of her immediately. Pointing an accusing finger at her senior maid, the chibi Duchess whines in total defeat, while Tina just smiles warmly, telling her boss to lie back and rest up. Sitting beside her on the mattress, the Duke gently rests his hand on her shoulder to comfort her, chuckling softly before getting cut off by a sudden dry cough. Crossing her arms with a stern glare, Molly scolds the Duchess for ignoring her strict doctor's orders by sneaking into the garden earlier yesterday. Molly gently explains that while everyone understands her profound love for Little Isle, wandering around sick and staring intensely at a toddler just frightens a young child who doesn't understand her intentions yet. Softening her tone, Molly acknowledges the heavy secrets weighing on the Duchess's heart, pointing out how clearly obvious it is because she has been holding back her maternal love for way too long. Recalling how Little Isle always acts overly polite and anxious to please, Molly points out how heartbreaking it is for a 2-year-old child to constantly walk on eggshells around everyone. Despite possessing immense hidden magical power, Little Isle locks her true feelings deep inside, treating everyone with cautious distrust as if bracing for eventual abandonment. Kneeling respectfully before her mistress, Molly urges the Duchess to understand that building a genuine relationship with her daughter requires delicate patience rather than harsh demands. Tears stream down the Duchess's face as she breaks down in total despair, weeping over how terrified she is of accidentally closing her child's heart forever. Holding her trembling hands, the legendary swordswoman bitterly laments how her curse-ravaged body has rendered her too weak to even hold her own child. Honesty check, seeing this fierce powerhouse knight reduced to a weeping mother craving a simple hug is so heartbreaking. Trapped under metaphorical chains of self-hatred, she hides her face, weeping softly over how hideous and inadequate she feels in front of her baby. Wrapping his arms around her trembling body, the Duke pulls his crying wife into a tight, comfortable embrace, reassuring her that it's completely okay to let her tears fall. Maid Molly gently hands over a steaming cup of warm tea, advising the Duchess to prioritize recovering her physical health so she can meet her daughter with full strength. Taking a slow exhalation, the Duchess promises to abide by her bed rest, admitting that her reckless actions were entirely her fault. She sips the hot tea with tearful resolve, pledging to stay in bed until her body recovers completely before trying to meet her daughter again. Watching her mistress calm down, Molly feels a profound sense of sympathy for the struggling royal couple. Suddenly raising his voice, the Duke tightly grabs her hands, passionately scolding her for trying to retreat into isolation and leave all the parenting duties to him alone. Cupping her soft cheek with immense affection, he tenderly reminds her that making a mistake just means they have to try again together rather than running away from their child. When he asks if she plans on repeating her blunders, the Duchess locks eyes with him, fiercely declaring that she will never scare her baby girl again. Yet lingering anxiety still nags at her mind, making her fear that Little Isle will never open her heart no matter what she tries. Leaning in close to brush his lips against her cheek, the Duke softly promises to visit Little Isle tomorrow morning to smooth things over so she can rest peacefully. Snuggling together on the couch, the royal couple finds comfort in each other's warmth, while both maids quietly slip out of the room to give them privacy. Walking down the quiet hallway, senior maid Tina clasps her hands together in solemn prayer, asking the ancient forest god to bring peace and happiness to their troubled family. Next morning, bright sunlight bathes the grand castle as the Duke enters Little Isle's bedroom, carrying a gorgeous bouquet of fresh flowers. But as he steps inside, he finds a massive blanket mound sitting on the mattress, with only a plush teddy bear peeking out, while Little Isle hides completely beneath the covers. Glancing at Maid Molly in total bewilderment, the Duke asks what caused this sudden blanket fortress, to which Molly sighingly attributes to last night's awkward encounter. Smiling warmly, the patient father walks over to the bedside, determined to coax his hidden daughter out of her cozy fabric cave. Unable to resist, the Duke grabs his own blanket and wraps himself up like a giant green cocoon right beside her on the mattress. Seriously, this father wins the award for peak comedy parenting. He literally built a matching blanket burrito just to chat with her. Side by side, the two blanket burritos sit on the bed in complete silence, with Little Isle cautiously peeking out from her pink hood to inspect her eccentric dad. Staring at the massive green lump sitting next to her, Chibi Isle blinks in utter confusion, wondering what hilarious stunt her father is pulling now.
Peeking out from his green hood, the Duke lets out a heavy sigh, cheekily confessing to his toddler daughter that her mother is actually a total silly fool. He goes on a hilarious rant about his wife's tsundere temper, dramatically whining about how hurtful it is when she flips out at him for worrying about her health. Lowering his voice, he reveals that her mother was so unbelievably flustered after getting caught sneaking into her room yesterday that she literally lost her breath and sprained her ankle. Trying to create a shared cozy sanctuary, the Duke suddenly drapes his blanket over both of them. But having none of his suffocating enthusiasm, little Al immediately shoves her tiny hand into his cheek, telling her overly clingy dad to back off. Wasting no time, little Isle hops off the bed and scurries across the carpet, while her dramatic father cries out in dismay. Internally, she wonders if he's just telling silly stories to make her feel better. Pausing in her tracks, little Isle clenches her tiny hands, internally reflecting that she isn't angry, just deeply terrified. Memories of being blamed and told she should have never been born in her past life still haunt her, making her fear that nothing will ever change. Looking back at her dad, little Isle recalls the grand lore surrounding her mother, Jan Simonistis, the strongest magic greatsword wielder on the entire continent, born with the soul of a giant and divine power. Can we talk about how breathtaking her mother's knight armor artwork is? She looks like a glorious endgame goddess. Continuing his cozy heart-to-heart with little Isle on the mattress, the Duke smiles softly while explaining his wife's quirky personality. He gently confesses that because her mother was raised in extreme shelter and privilege, she can sometimes come across as a bit stiff, formal, or high and mighty without meaning any harm. Softening his eyes with deep sympathy, the Duke looks down solemnly, revealing the painful truth behind his wife's distant behavior. He admits that for the past agonizing 3 years, he has watched the Grand Duchess break down and weep almost every single day in private. Sitting quietly on the bed, Chibi Isle blinks her huge green eyes in total shock as she listens to her father's words. Hearing about her mother's daily weeping hits her right in the chest, making her tiny heart ache with unspoken sympathy. Gently resting his palm on his toddler's soft blonde hair, the Duke explains that those hidden tears were shed purely out of heartbreak over being unable to cradle her precious baby girl. Hearing this, little Ale clenches her tiny hands, internally drowning in severe guilt as she worries that her mother's suffering was entirely her fault just for being born. Can we talk about how heartbreaking this misunderstanding is? This poor little toddler is carrying the weight of the entire world on her tiny shoulders. Sensing her dark mood, the Duke instantly scoops her up into his arms, laughing warmly as he dispels her worries. He chuckles softly while clarifying that it's actually the complete opposite. Her mother is simply devastated and constantly blames herself for failing to do a single thing a proper mother should do. Holding his daughter close against his chest, the patient father gently explains that her mother is trying her absolute best right now, even if she still needs a little more time to heal her body and mind. He acknowledges that little Isle might find it hard to accept everything right away, but begs her to understand her mother's true feelings. Looking down at his silent toddler with a soft, pleading expression, the Duke gently asks if she can promise not to hate her mother. Staring down at her lap, little Isle feels a heavy lump in her throat as her father's desperate plea touches her soul. Overflowing with gratitude, the overjoyed father pulls little Isle into a loving hug, leaning down to press a sweet kiss against her forehead while thanking her from the bottom of his heart. Honestly, this dad deserves a medal for being the ultimate family mediator. He's single-handedly saving this broken household. Sitting together on the edge of the bed, the Duke points out how disastrous it would be if her mother kept believing that her own child hated her. He gently explains that suffering under such a cruel misunderstanding and isolating herself would only cause her mother's physical illness to deteriorate even further. Changing the subject with a cheerful wink, the Duke playfully brings up the morning's flower divination, declaring that today is officially the luckiest day for arts and crafts. He enthusiastically suggests that they build a cute handmade present together to cheer her sick mother up. A funny chibi graphic shows little Isle slumping her head in total defeat, letting out a dramatic exhalation next to yellow mimosa blossoms at the thought of doing arts and crafts. Soft sunlight filters through delicate yellow branches and green leaves, signaling a peaceful transition to the estate's craft room. I gotta say, the artist's aesthetic choices with these floral panel dividers are absolute perfection. Cut to the craft table, which is covered in absolute chaos with crumpled paper scraps, safety scissors, paint palettes, and tangled ribbons. Wearing a tiny red headscarf, Chibi Isle sits with dizzy spiral eyes as her dad scratches his cheek, chuckling awkwardly that craft time might have been a bit too difficult for her after all. Lowering lowering her head in total embarrassment, Chibi Isles slumps on her chair, internally sulking over how utterly useless her tiny toddler hands are at delicate paper cutting. Restlessly fidgeting with her fingers, little Isle sulks over failing to make the cute gift her dad wanted, convinced that she has completely disappointed him. But standing behind her with an apron tied around his waist, the Duke chuckles, amusement, reassuring her that trying was super fun, and at least they learned crafts aren't her strong suit. Looking up with big glossy eyes, little Isle worriedly asks what they should do about her mother's present now. Seeing his daughter's adorable concern, the father's heart melts completely. Seriously, watching this powerhouse Duke wear a frilly apron while comforting his toddler is pure comedy gold. Leaning down to gently stroke her red headscarf, the wise father softly explains that the physical object doesn't matter at all, whispers, "What truly counts is the sincere love and effort put behind it." Hearing his reassuring words, little Isle nods silently in understanding. Soft autumn leaves drift across the screen as little Isle ponders her dad's advice, realizing that sincerity is the only thing that matters. Clenching a small wooden pencil over a fresh sheet of paper, little Isle reflects on her past life, remembering that there's only one specific skill she's always excelled at. However, she hesitates, wondering if a potion recipe could ever work as a proper Mother's Day gift. Reaching up with her tiny hands, little Isle hands her father a detailed hand-drawn blueprint, bluntly demanding that he get all the listed ingredients ready immediately. Staring down at the paper, the Duke blinks in total bewilderment, his eyes turning into tiny cartoon dots as he tries to process what his toddler just handed him. Adjusting his glasses, the Duke inspects the paper with a serious look, amazed by the intricate chemical balance and rare medicinal herbs specified in her precise handwriting. Gently resting his hand on her red bonnet, the Duke smiles down at his daughter with deep admiration, completely trusting her surprising intellect without asking a single suspicious question. Cut to the mansion's private apothecary room, fully stocked with wooden crates of dried roots, hanging medicinal herbs, brass balancing scales, and a giant iron cauldron shining under magical lamps. As turquoise magical liquid bubbles inside the giant cauldron, the senior maid respectfully curtsies to the Duke and little Isle, reporting that all requested materials have been prepared. She hesitantly offers to hire the top royal apothecary in town, but the Duke proudly declines, declaring that his brilliant little daughter can handle it all by herself. Striding forward in her tiny red bonnet dress, Chibi Isle walks toward the brewing station with complete confidence. Behind her, the Duke glows with unbearable fatherly pride, radiating bright sparkle effects like an ultimate fanatic stage dad. A hilarious flashback graphic reveals little Aya's past life memories, showing her legendary warrior comrades frantically chugging down her overpowered max stat health potions while floating 99.99 healing numbers explode everywhere. Talk about an S-tier alchemist in a toddler's body. Crossing his arms with a smirking grin, the proud father nods in full confidence, knowing his daughter is about to cook up an absolute miracle cure. Cut to the exterior of the Grand Ducal Castle, where bright morning light shines over the majestic Gothic towers, interrupted only by a dry cough echo echoing through the halls. Inside her lavish private study, the Grand Duchess sits at her wooden desk with a cooling fever patch stuck to her forehead. Coughing weakly, the sick mistress sternly inquires if all imperial spies infiltrating the duchy are currently under strict surveillance. Bowing respectfully, her shadow guard confirms that their counterintelligence units are quietly eliminating the enemy spies as they speak. Unfolding a detailed strategic map showing bloody battle lines, the guard explains that severe succession conflicts within the imperial family have left the enemy administration in total disarray, preventing them from sending high-level threats. Clasping her trembling hands together in relief, the Duchess lets out a quiet breath, but firmly orders her guard to maintain 24/7 surveillance for the sake of her child. She instructs him to request immediate military support from the Canyon's Wolfgang clan to wipe out any remaining sleeper agents. Suddenly, a polite knock rings across the wooden double doors as a maid's soft voice asks for permission to enter. Looking up from her stack of state documents, the Duchess calmly asks maid Molly what business brings her to the study. Stepping inside the study while carrying a sleek silver platter, maid Molly presents a beautifully tied glass bottle filled with luminous green liquid, proudly announcing that the Duke and young lady sent her a special gift. Hearing her daughter's name, the flustered Duchess slams her hands on the desk, leaping out of her chair in absolute shock. Panicking completely, she screams that she needs to dress up properly to receive her baby's gift, sprinting out of the room at top speed, leaving her guard and maid floating in total confusion. Seconds later, the Duchess dramatically returns, transformed in a breathtaking white and gold lace ball gown, holding a frilly lace fan while striking a majestic noble pose. Yet, looking around the empty hallway, her fan trembles as she awkwardly realizes her toddler didn't come in person, blushing bright red while desperately asking Molly what her baby sent. Smiling warmly at her mistress's adorable panic, Molly presents the glistening green potion bottle on the silver platter, confirming that this is the precious present. A sweet flashback memory shows little Isle intensely stirring the giant cauldron with a wooden stick while holding raw medicinal herbs in her tiny hand. Molly proudly adds that the young lady personally prepared this entire formula by herself. Staring at the glowing green jar in utter disbelief, the Duchess gasps, asking if her fragile 2-year-old baby really handled heavy preparation knives and boiling cauldrons all on her own. Molly admits she was equally shocked by the toddler's miraculous skill, explaining that her brewing method was so ancient and complex that she almost brought a doctor to test it first. But before Molly can even finish her sentence, the impatient Duchess grabs the bottle and chugs the entire medicine in one giant gulp. Seriously, this mom has zero self-preservation when it comes to her daughter. She would drink actual poison if her baby made it. Instantly, the Duchess breaks into a violent coughing fit, clutching her throat as Molly freaks out in a complete panic, worrying that the homemade brew had a dangerous side effect. But holding up her hand, the Duchess wheezes weakly, clarifying that the medicine itself is perfectly fine. With tears streaming down her blushing cheeks, the emotional Duchess stares down at the empty bottle in total awe, overwhelmed by the unbelievably familiar, legendary taste resting on her tongue. A breathtaking memory vision flashes before her eyes, revealing a stunning silver-haired female knight in full combat armor holding a healing flask. The Duchess recognizes this exact secret potion recipe that belonged exclusively to her long-lost comrade from her past battles. Weeping softly into her hands, the Duchess breaks down in frantic confusion, wondering on earth how her 2-year-old daughter could possibly brew her fallen friend's signature recipe. Shaking her head in denial, she grabs Molly's shoulders, crying out in total desperation to see her daughter immediately. Cut to a bright, sunlit room surrounded by lush green garden branches, where the Duke and Little Isle sit side by side on wooden stools near the window, quietly enjoying a peaceful reading session together. Walking down the quiet arched corridor, the Duchess stops dead in her tracks, watching her husband and little daughter sit together in serene harmony. A bittersweet visual phantom of her past life comrade overlaps with her tiny daughter, filling the Duchess's heart with unbearable nostalgia and overwhelming emotional stakes. Tears stream down the Duchess's face as she covers her mouth, sobbing quietly in the hallway while maid Molly gently holds her arm, worriedly reminding her that the doctor strictly forbade heavy walking due to her sprained ankle. Turning her head with tearful determination, the Grand Duchess wipes her tears away, softly declaring that her husband was right all along. Being present by her daughter's side matters more than any physical pain or fear. Flashing a radiant, passionate smile, the legendary swordswoman vows never to run away again. She commands Molly to immediately summon the kingdom's top royal doctor to heal her body, declaring that tonight they will throw a magnificent mansion-wide welcome party to celebrate her precious baby girl. What an incredible turn of events! This family has finally taken their first real step toward true happiness. Resolving to finally heal the rift between them, the Grand Duchess beams with gentle grace, agreeing that it is high time she steps up as a mother. Stepping forward alongside her loyal maid Molly, she gives a firm nod, officially setting their heartwarming plan into motion. Cut back to the cozy study, where the Duke cradles a heavy antique leather tome decorated with ornate gold filigree. Looking down at his adorable daughter, he warmly announces that he brought back her absolute favorite fantasy book, The Mythical Legends of Divinely Bestowed Bloodlines. Settling down on the plush rug, the doting dad places little Isle securely in his lap while opening the giant illustrated book, chuckling softly that it truly is a captivating piece of literature. Raising a finger with a bright smile, the father playfully breaks down the legendary tales inside, while little Isle stares up with wide, shimmering green eyes. Seriously, watching this terrifying war hero turn into a gentle bedtime story reader is enough to make anyone smile. Suddenly, the double doors gently swing open as maid Molly steps into the room, bowing with impeccable elegance to greet both her master and the young lady. The moment little Isle spots her favorite maid, her tiny face lights up. Dashing forward on her chubby legs, the toddler buries her face straight into Molly's dark apron, holding on for dear life with the most affectionate hug. Gently stroking her soft golden hair, Molly giggles softly, confessing that she missed her little princess just as much. Meanwhile, sitting on the couch in the background, the dramatically neglected Duke clutches his chest in hysterical, exaggerated heartbreak, whining that their closeness is making him green with envy. Talk about a needy dad.
Composing herself with a soft smile, Molly gently pats the toddler's head, revealing that she brings an official message directly from the Grand Duchess regarding the potion they sent over earlier. As little Isle peeks out from behind the maid's skirt with an anxious flutter in her heart, Molly explains that the moment her mother discovered her delicate toddler brewed the miraculous medicine with her own tiny hands, Molly places her hand gently over her heart, revealing with radiant joy that the Duchess absolutely loved the present beyond words. Hearing those words, a delicate blush spreads across little Isle's puffy cheeks as she buries her nose back into the fabric, her green eyes sparkling with unspoken relief. Honestly, seeing this tough former warrior blush over her mom's approval is top-tier cuteness. Adjusting his glasses with a focused expression, the Duke leans forward, paying close attention to every detail of the maid's report. Molly officially announces that to make amends for her long absence and celebrate her daughter's return, the Grand Duchess is throwing a grand welcome party at the mansion tonight. Hearing this, the Duke hesitantly asks if her health has truly recovered enough, offering to postpone the feast so she doesn't overexert herself. But Molly gently clarifies that the party was delayed strictly because of her poor physical condition, and now that her fever is broken, she insists on holding it immediately. As Molly explains how meticulously the Duchess is organizing every single detail to make her daughter happy, little Isle's cheerful expression completely vanishes, replaced by a dark, anxious shadow lingering across her eyes. Sensing her sudden silence, Molly drops down to her knees, worriedly asking if the young lady is still frightened of meeting her mother. Deep inside, little Isle's heart sinks into pitch-black dread at the mere fearful gasp of mention of a high society welcome party. The air around her drops to freezing temperatures as horrific trauma from her past life rushes back like a tidal wave. Is it just me, or does this artist excel at making traumatic flashbacks feel terrifyingly real? In her painful past life, a high society banquet was nothing more than a torment chamber. Being born into absolute poverty alongside her birth mother, they were forced to work as low-class servants, carrying heavy silver platters while arrogant nobles mocked their dirty rags. She painfully recalls how her past comrade Mo Dai once begged the cruel emperor to let little Isle sit at the feast. But instead of mercy, the ruthless ruler accused him of begging for cheap sympathy, harshly punishing them both. That humiliation drove her abusive mother into an uncontrollable violent rage. Visions of shattered porcelain ring in her ears as her past mother violently kicked her onto the cold stone floor, screaming that she was a useless curse who ruined her life, while cold-hearted guards merely yelled at them not to break the expensive imperial dishes. Even after growing up into a legendary hero and earning a coveted seat at the victory banquets, she was forced to sit alone in total isolation, surrounded by hypocrites who only praised the emperor's authority while treating her like a dangerous tool. Looking around at the fake smiles of the noble crowd, her past self realized with bitter clarity that she would never belong in such a cold, superficial world. Snapping back to the present, little Isle looks up at her loving father, remembering his sincere promise that within this house, she holds absolute freedom, including the right to reject anything that makes her uncomfortable. Clenching her tiny fist over her chest, the toddler gathers all her courage, softly admitting that she truly does not want to go to the dinner party. Kneeling down to her eye level, the compassionate Duke gently strokes her head, softly reassuring her that he completely respects her decision, and if she truly dislikes parties, she doesn't have to go. But as he hesitantly stammers that her mother worked so hard to set everything up, little Isle's eyes turn dead hollow, feeling a cold sting of betrayal, thinking that even her dad is backing out on his promise. Panicking instantly at her heartbroken expression, the poor Duke waves his arms wildly, begging her not to give him that devastating look. Gently cupping her shoulders, the flustered dad desperately tries to fix his words, terrified of breaking his baby girl's trust. Stepping in to save the day, Molly chuckles softly, revealing that the wise Grand Duke had already anticipated her anxiety. To make her feel completely safe, he officially invited a special guest, a trusted personal friend who will accompany her throughout the entire event. Tilting her head in utter confusion, little Isle wonders if Molly is referring to herself. But Molly playfully wags her finger, giggling that while she will certainly be up by her side, this mysterious VIP guest is someone far more important. Blinking in total surprise, the Duke adjusts his glasses, asking who on earth could possibly be invited on such short notice. With grand dramatic flair, Molly presents a giant, adorable teddy bear wearing a yellow plaid bow tie, proudly announcing that Sir Bear Knight has just been granted an official noble title and the Order of Merit by the Grand Duke himself. Hearing this ridiculously cute revelation, the overjoyed father enthusiastically claps his hands together, while little Isle stands
stands completely frozen in place like a statue. Staring at the stuffed animal with wide dot-like eyes, Chibi Isle lets out a completely lost, "Huh?" Seriously, granting a stuffed teddy bear an official knighthood just to comfort a toddler is the peak definition of wealthy noble flexing. With an endearing grin, Molly kneels down, gently placing the plush knight directly into her young lady's bewildered arms. Cut to an hour later, where Sir Bear Knight has been fully outfitted in a tailor-made miniature noble suit, complete with a feathered green hat, cape, and gold family crest. Sitting beside him in a ruffled pink ball gown, Little Isle admits he's looking surprisingly dapper, but secretly whimpers that carrying a stuffed bear doesn't make a scary noble party any less terrifying. Her mind spirals into dark anxieties as she imagines cold-hearted Imperial guards glaring down at her, forcing her to sit alone on the floor while ruthless aristocrats whisper cruel insults behind her back. Staring out the window at the orange sunset, the poor toddler trembles with rising dread, but right at that moment, a soft metallic latch clicks open near the entrance. Swinging the doors wide open, two mansion maids step into the room wearing fluffy plush bear hoods over their formal uniforms, cheerfully announcing that they have arrived to escort the young lady and her knight. Clinging to her stuffed bear, Little Isle blinks in utter astonishment at the ridiculously cute sight. Escorting her down the grand hallway, the maids explain that to ensure her absolute comfort, the Grand Duke ordered every single mansion guard to prepare a custom welcome. Snicker. They add that even Lord Bear's personal security detail is waiting outside. As Little Ale steps into the main corridor, her jaw drops to the floor. Standing in two flawless rows are dozens of towering, muscled elite royal knights, and every single one of them is wearing adorable brown bear ears pinned to their heavy steel armor. Saluting in unison, the lead commander roars out a fierce welcome for the young lady and Sir Bear. Dropping their intimidating guard personas entirely, the massive buff knights wave giant fluffy plush bear paws at the toddler, chorusing sweet greetings in pitch-matched gentle voices. Staring at the absurd sight of battle-hardened veterans acting like soft mascots, Little Isle's eyes turn into giant white circles. Talk about maximum wholesome protection. Overwhelmed by the absurdly sweet effort, a bright red blush covers her face as she buries her head into her teddy bear, giggling softly to herself that it isn't terrifying at all anymore. Walking up the polished marble staircase holding her plush companion, Little Isle looks up to see her father waiting at the top. The Duke looks stunning in a crisp white and gold military uniform, complete with a tiny teddy bear brooch pinned proudly to his chest badge. Reaching down with gentle care, the loving dad officially takes custody of Sir Bear Knight, holding the plush toy like a precious royal artifact while taking his daughter's tiny hand. As the massive double doors swing open, the grand banquet hall comes into view, decorated wall-to-wall with soft yellow flowers, glowing magical lanterns, and sweet bear decorations. Standing in the center of the radiant ballroom is the Grand Duchess, breathtakingly dressed in a sweeping golden lace ball gown. Opening her arms wide with glowing tears of affection in her eyes, she calls out to her daughter with the warmest, most passionate welcome. Without caring about her regal dress or noble pride, the powerful mistress drops straight to her knees on the hard stone floor, extending her trembling hands toward her long-lost child. Looking into her mother's overflowing, tearful gaze, Little Isle's heart trembles, sensing an immense, unconditional warmth that she had never experienced in her entire past life. Unable to hold back any longer, the Duchess wraps her arms tightly around the toddler, pulling her into a sweet, protective embrace while softly kissing her forehead, whispering, crying out how deeply she loves her precious Isle. Cut to a delightful family feast at the grand dining table. Surrounding her with unbearable affection, the Duke holds a silver knife, eagerly offering to cut her juicy steak, while the radiant Duchess holds up a cup of decadent chocolate pudding, begging her baby girl to try the chef's newest sweet creation. Seeing this once divided family finally sharing true warmth and laughter is the ultimate happy ending we all prayed for. Looking at the extravagant spread of adorable teddy bears and sweet pastries, Little Isle sits bewildered, realizing that this warm family gathering is completely different from the terrifying banquets of her past. She can clearly feel the genuine love radiating from her parents, but having never experienced true affection before, her mind doesn't even know how to react. Fidgeting nervously on her dining chair, the little girl lowers her head, overcome with anxious tremors as she inwardly whimpers that she has no idea what she's supposed to do in a situation filled with so much care. Sensing her daughter's uneasy stillness, the Grand Duchess looks across the table with deeply worried eyes, gently reaching out her hand as she softly offers to hold her tiny fingers to comfort her. As her mother's outstretched hand trembles in the air, Little Isle's wide, hesitant eyes lock onto her, frozen in hesitation as the emotional weight of the moment hangs between them. Honestly, can you blame the poor toddler for freezing up when her previous life was full of abuse? Misunderstanding her daughter's silence as pure fear, the Duchess slowly pulls her hand back, dark, gloomy shadows hanging over her face as she bitterly blames herself, muttering that she was foolish to think a simple family meal could change how much Isle fears her. Clasping her trembling hands tightly over her chest with tears welling in her eyes, sobbing, the heartbroken mother berates herself out loud for being so foolishly naive. Panic instantly surges through little Isle as she stammers flustered, desperately waving her tiny arms to explain that she isn't afraid at all, but the words get stuck right in her throat. Stepping in like the ultimate peacekeeper, the compassionate Duke gestures warmly to his wife, gently reassuring her that Isle doesn't fear her at all, and reminding her how hard she worked picking out gifts for their daughter. Look at this top-tier dad keeping the family together. Turning his bright, encouraging smile toward the toddler, the Duke softly asks Isle to confirm his words, hopeful tone, hoping to ease his wife's heavy heart. Nodding timidly with a soft squeak, little Isle agrees, prompting the Duke to offer her a warm cup of sweet tea to help her relax, while the overly anxious Duchess immediately jumps up to pour it herself. Determined to prove her devotion, the nervous Duchess firmly grips the heavy teapot, though her hands shake uncontrollably with overwhelming performance anxiety. Oh no! Her extreme trembling causes the hot tea to splash right over the side, spilling straight onto Isle's pretty pink dress. The Duke gasps in panic while the mortified mother desperately reaches out, begging to know if her baby girl got burned. Staring down at her wet dress in total stunned silence, little Isle's mind spirals back into past life trauma, instinctively expecting to be violently beaten or screamed at for causing a mess. But instead of anger, the toddler looks up to see her mother holding back hysterical tears, coughing weakly from extreme stress while muttering that she truly is completely useless. Talk about an emotional roller coaster. The artist is absolutely crushing these raw expressions. Gently pulling his trembling wife against his chest, the loving Duke rests his forehead against hers, softly whispering that she shouldn't push herself so hard and praising her for trying her best. Wrapped safely in her husband's arms, the Duchess listens as the Duke affectionately suggests a fresh start, asking if she would like to cut a slice of the special welcome cake for their daughter instead. With a radiant, supportive smile, the Duke encourages her, pointing out that serving a sweet slice of cake would be a wonderful way to show Isle her love. Looking up with tear-glistening eyes, the Duchess softly asks if that's truly okay, receiving an instant, enthusiastic nod of approval from her husband. Returning to her seat beside her husband, the Duchess takes a deep breath, determined to make the sweet moment special for little Isle, who sits quietly watching her parents. Suddenly, the mansion maids step forward with dramatic flair, presenting a breathtaking, multi-tiered strawberry shortcake, topped with fresh berries, edible flowers, and an adorable bear figurine. Staring at the majestic dessert, Chibi Isle's eyes sparkle in absolute marvel. Wearing adorable plush bear hoods, the cheerful maids present the silver server, declaring that this family unity cake was custom designed by the Duchess herself. Confetti explodes into the air as everyone choruses a joyous welcome home for Lady Isle. Carefully balancing a slice of pink frosted cake on a silver plate, the Duchess hands it over with agonizing care, softly pleading for her daughter to take it slow. Holding the small plate, little Isle looks up at her mother's nervous, hopeful smile, feeling the immense weight of her maternal affection. Slip! The slice of cake balance fails, sliding straight off the plate and smashing upside down onto the stone floor. The Duke and the bare-hooded maids freeze in absolute nightmare terror. You've got to be kidding me. Can this poor mom catch a single break today? A dark shadow instantly falls across the Duchess's face as tears overflow from her eyes, her heart shattering into a million pieces. Overcome with agonizing failure, the devastated mother turns her face away, sadly unable to bear the shame of ruining yet another special moment. Collapsing straight to her knees, the poor Duchess breaks down into violent coughing fits, while the frantic Duke and maids rush forward to help her. Visualizing dark, thorny chains entangling her soul, the mother's hopeless thoughts echo in despair, crying out that she is completely useless and unable to care for a child. Hunched over on the stone floor, the weeping Duchess chokes on her tears, wretchedly confessing that she is a truly terrible mother who doesn't deserve her baby girl. Sobbing uncontrollably into her husband's coat, she begs him to let her retreat to her room, so she stops embarrassing herself, bitterly believing that Isle would be far better off without her around. Watching her mother weep in total heartbreak, little Isle feels dark chains of past trauma creeping around her own mind, miserably thinking that her presence only brings sadness and suffering to everyone around her. Visions of her tragic past life flash before her eyes, bleeding alone in rags, hated by everyone, making her wonder how anyone could ever love a cursed monster like her without being abandoned. But as she looks at her weeping mother, a strange, warm revelation fills her heart, realizing that someone else is suffering from the exact same fear of rejection. Remembering Molly's wise words that the choice to reach out is entirely hers, the toddler makes up her mind. Remembering her father's promise that this family would always teach her what true love means, the brave little girl takes a deep breath to comfort her mother. Stepping off her boosted seat, Chibi Isle walks directly over to her crying mother, gently tugging on her sweeping yellow dress hem. Gasping softly, the tear-streaked Duchess turns her head in total shock, looking down at the tiny girl standing right beside her. Utilizing her secret magical telepathy, little Isle prepares to transmit her true feelings directly into her mother's heart, since words alone aren't enough. Holding up a fresh slice of pink cake with both hands, the toddler softly projects her thoughts, admitting that while she doesn't know how to act like a normal daughter yet, she wants her mother to know that she is deeply, unconditionally grateful for every single thing and holds absolutely zero resentment in her heart. Look at this incredible emotional payoff. My heart is melting into a puddle. Hearing those magical words resonate inside her soul, the Duchess gasps with wide, glittering eyes, overcome with sheer joy as the Duke wraps a warm hand around her shoulder. Trying to prove that the dropped dessert wasn't a tragedy at all, Chibi Isle scoops up a piece of the falling cake off the floor, nonchalantly popping it toward her mouth. Seeing a royal toddler about to eat floor cake? The Duke, Duchess, and maids scream in absolute unified horror. Sprinting at Mach 5 speed with wild comic panic, the parents and maids tackle forward like elite bodyguards, shoving a clean slice of cake into her hand while yelling that she cannot eat food off the ground. Looking up at her frantic, loving family with a soft, genuine smile blooming across her face, little Isle feels a sweet warmth she has never felt before. Bursting into overwhelming tears of pure happiness, the emotional Duchess cries out that she loves her precious daughter more than anything in the world. Wrapping her arms tightly around the toddler in a warm, protective embrace, the mother buries her face into her hair. Resting her chin on her shoulder, Isle softly smiles, thinking to herself that such an amazing mother is almost too good for her. Cut to later that evening in the cozy master bedroom, where the loving parents gently tuck little Isle into her plush bed alongside Sir Bear Knight, wishing her the sweetest dreams. Leaning down in perfect harmony, both the Duke and Duchess tenderly kiss her soft cheeks, whispering a synchronized "I love you" that echoes softly in the warm room. Slowly drawing the heavy bedroom doors shut, the parents step into the hallway, wishing her a peaceful good night until tomorrow. Snuggling deep under her warm blanket while holding her stuffed knight, little Ale stares at the soft ceiling lights, letting out a relaxed sigh. She realizes that for the first time in 2 lives, no one was hurt, no one was sad, and she finally found a place where she truly belongs. What an absolutely perfect, heartwarming chapter end. Feeling a wave of quiet relief wash over his face, the Duke gazes softly at his wife, whispering to himself how glad he is that he managed to fix things and handle the situation properly this time. Cupping her flushed cheeks in absolute adoration with glittering star eyes, the overjoyed Duchess gushes about how impossibly adorable their tiny daughter is. Overcome with gratitude, the Duchess tightly clasps her husband's hand, thanking him from the bottom of her heart for being by her side, before leaning in for a sweet, passionate kiss. Holding her hands tenderly, the Duke reminds her with a soft smile that he promised to make both her and Isle happy, prompting his wife to whisper that she will always trust him. Standing together by the grand arched window, the Duke softly confides that Isle's 3rd birthday is coming up in 3 months, the exact time when her sealed memories will return, meaning their time to connect with her is running out fast. Rubbing her forehead in deep stress, the Duchess agrees they need to shower Isle with family love before then, though both parents let out a troubled sigh as they remember another huge problem: their uncontrollable wild eldest son. Seriously? This family has enough chaotic drama to fill a whole soap opera. Walking down the grand hallway together, the couple decides to leave the eldest son's chaotic antics for tomorrow, with the Duchess whining that Isle's bedroom is way too far from theirs and suggesting they move her right next door. Out in the sunny garden, the gentle mansion maid sits alongside Chibi Isle on a plush flower-covered swing, softly asking the toddler if she's truly sure she wants to reject moving to the room next to her parents. Gently pushing the swing, the maid asks why she refused the move, leaving little Isle staring quietly at the grass while internally admitting that she simply has no idea how to properly interact with her new family. Staring off into the breeze, the reincarnated toddler reflects on how clearly she can feel her parents' overflowing love and genuine warmth. But as she sits alone on the wide swing cushion, she worries to herself, wondering how someone with 2 past lives is supposed to act like a normal, innocent child when hesitation still fills her heart. Reaching out to gently frame the toddler's cheeks with her hands, the compassionate maid pleads with Isle not to look so somber, softly promising that staying close to her parents will bring her so much more joy. Talk about the ultimate supportive maid, she deserves a massive raise. Offering a warm smile, the maid suggests reading a nice storybook together until the castle's top physician arrives to give Isle a quick medical checkup to help with her speech difficulties. Glancing toward the estate gates with a puzzled frown, the maid mutters under her breath that the doctor's carriage should have arrived by now and is unusually late. Tugging anxiously on the maid's skirt, little Isle points toward the bright blue sky, noticing a swarm of ominous black dots speeding directly toward them as if chasing something. Shielding her eyes against the afternoon glare, the maid peers into the distance, gasping in complete bewilderment as those strange dots rapidly grow larger. Hurrying off the swing seat, Chibi Isle rushes toward the lawn, her eyes widening in sudden realization as she identifies the incoming threat. Boom! Massive infernal flames burst across the sky as ferocious, fire-breathing dragons descend from above, torching the incoming doctor's horse carriage in a chaotic blaze. Splintering against the rough dirt road, the burning carriage skids wildly out of control while the panicked driver screams at the top of his lungs for help. Telling Isle to stay safely put, the brave maid sprints toward the burning carriage to rescue the injured doctor and driver, while Isle notes with relief that the estate itself didn't suffer major structural damage. Watching the smoke clear from afar, the cautious toddler decides she can't just sit idly by while dangerous magical creatures roam near the estate grounds. Trotting quickly through the high grass with her tiny shoes, Isle notices that the flying beasts are surprisingly small and low to the ground, leading her straight toward the estate's sunroom. Stepping through the shattered sunroom doors, the toddler gasps at the utter destruction inside. Overturned flower pots, scattered dirt, ripped papers, and tossed toys everywhere. Holding a heavy leather book against her chest, Chibi Isle shakes her head, deciding the mess has nothing to do with her, and turning to leave until a sudden rustle in the bushes startles her. Rustling out from behind the thick bushes, a messy blonde toddler pops up, covered in mud and holding a handful of dirt, leaves, and wriggling earthworms. Isle blinks in shock, instantly recognizing his golden hair and royal gaze as the Duke's infamous eldest son. Splash! Without a single second of hesitation, the wild little brother chucks a giant handful of mud and live worms straight into Isle's face. Covered in filth, Isle stands frozen in pure disbelief. Wow, talk about a terrible first sibling impression. Dark, traumatic visions of her past lives flash in her mind, recalling how every single time she trusted her own blood relatives, blood ties only brought her unspeakable suffering and betrayal. Remembering bloody battlefields and tragic betrayals from her former life, the traumatized girl feels a heavy bitterness surging back into her heart. Turning around with an annoyed scowl, Isle prepares to walk away and ignore him completely, when suddenly a tiny hand reaches out and firmly grabs the hem of her dress. Looking back in surprise, Isle sees her messy little brother holding out a single, tiny white daisy toward her with a determined, pouty expression. Staring at the delicate wildflower clutched in his dirt-stained fingers, the stunned toddler wonders to herself if her wild brother is actually trying to apologize with a gift. Pouting with an exaggerated huff, Chibi Isle turns her head away, stubbornly telling herself that she isn't silly enough to be won over by a cheap, lame flower. Wah! Bursting into loud, hysterical tears, the overwhelmed boy leaps forward and tackles his sister in a desperate, tight hug, clinging to her dress until she finally accepts his offering. Look at this little tsundere sister getting totally defeated by sibling affection. The second she takes the wildflower, the boy instantly stops crying, bursting into a radiant, sparkling smile. Feeling a warm glow in her chest, Isle smiles softly, thinking to herself that maybe having a brother isn't so bad after all. Until a loud gasp shatters the silence. Panicked maids come sprinting around the corner, screaming in absolute terror as they tackle the young master away, panting, pleading for him not to harm the young lady. Dropping the flower in the struggle, Ale sighs miserably, thinking that everyone still views her as an unwanted outsider. As Ale turns her back in sadness, the frantic maids attempt to hold the boy back, only for a terrifying incandescent flame aura to suddenly erupt from the child's body. Roar! Massive, blinding columns of draconic fire burst out from the young master, transforming his small silhouette into a monstrous winged dragon shadow that threatens to incinerate everything. Staring at the terrifying draconic outline glowing within the flames, Isle's eyes widen in sheer shock as she instantly recognizes the familiar shape of the dragon. Visions of her ancient hero past flash before her eyes, remembering how she fought in an exhausting 7-day duel to subjugate the legendary Red Dragon King. Remembering how they became inseparable battle partners, traveling the realm and happily sharing grilled fish by peaceful forest riversides. Tears stain her memory as she recalls being locked in a dark dungeon, voice trembling, forcing herself to banish her beloved dragon partner Dio so he wouldn't be executed alongside her. Realizing that Dio's legendary soul is currently possessing her little brother, Isle watches in alarm as the frantic maids scoop her up, desperately trying to flee from the rampaging beast. Seeing the monstrous red dragon roar directly at the cowering maids, little Isle fearlessly breaks free, stepping right between the beast and the servants with her tiny arms stretched out wide, yelling at him to stop bullying innocent people. With absolute authority radiating from her glowing green eyes, the tiny toddler points her finger straight at the massive dragon's snout. Snap! In a fierce, commanding voice, Chibi Isle shouts a single word, sharply, "Sit down." Thud! Shocking everyone present, the terrifying dragon instantly freezes, drooping its wings and plopping its heavy tail onto the grass like an obedient, scolded puppy. You gotta be kidding me. She just domesticated a whole dragon king with a single finger poke. Walking right up to the massive skilled beast, little Isle softly reaches out her hand, gently stroking its nose while whispering that it's okay and he doesn't need to be scared anymore. Whimpering with a cute gow, the enormous pink dragon closes its eyes in total bliss, affectionately nuzzling its large snout right against the toddler's cheek. Gazing into the dragon's gentle eyes, realizes that while this creature carries Dio's draconic energy, it isn't actually her old partner himself. But as she tenderly rests her hand against the beast's snout, memories of her beloved Dio overlap with the present, filling her heart with a deep, comforting sense of warmth and belonging. What a breathtakingly emotional milestone for little Isle. Gently holding the glowing pink dragon close to her chest, little Isle reflects on how strikingly similar this overwhelming warmth feels compared to her ancient past. She knows that dragons in this realm possess immense intelligence and eternal life, making their mystical presence unlike anything else in the world. Realizing that true dragons cannot be defeated unless they willingly sacrifice themselves, Isle admits she almost believed her lost partner Dio had reincarnated into her wild brother. Meanwhile, the watching maids, in total shock, whispering amongst themselves that Isle's miracle must be the legendary power shared between twins. Standing nearby with a proud smile, the maid Molly calls out to Isle, while the Grand Duke himself adjusts his glasses with a subtle smirk, admitting that her performance was genuinely impressive. Kneeling down to Isle's level, the Grand Duke praises her for fearlessly protecting the servants and pacifying her brother's wild draconic rampage. Flustered by the overwhelming praise, the little tsundere turns her cheek away, secretly grumbling that he's making way too big of a deal over a quick fix. Honestly, watching this powerful Duke act like a proud soccer dad is pure comedic gold. Scooping both toddlers up into his arms, the Grand Duke effortlessly hoists Isle onto his high shoulder while clutching his unruly son like a bag of groceries as the wild boy shouts out in energetic protest. Giving his wild son a stern glare, the Grand Duke scolds him for torching the poor physician's carriage just to dodge taking his daily medicine, warning that a severe punishment awaits him later. Instantly deflating into a sad little lump, the young master whines out a defeated grunt, realizing he's officially grounded. Glancing over at her father's affectionate expression, little Isle feels a sweet, gentle blush creeping onto her cheeks as warmth fills her heart. Back inside the Grand Estate bedroom, the weakened Duchess rests in her wide canopy bed while the top castle physician and maids gather around to discuss her ongoing condition. Sitting down across from the Grand Duke, the physician firmly advises against using heavy suppression magic or drugs on the Duchess's recent seizures, urging them to let her body rest naturally. Turning his attention toward the toddlers on the floor, the doctor warns that young children under 3 who haven't received the forest god's holy blessing shouldn't be exposed to large crowds or stressful environments. Suddenly breaking protocol, the exhausted physician leaps up and chases the wild little brother around the room with a glowing green medicine bottle, screaming that he's brewed this exact dose 6 times today. Restraining the stressed doctor with a calm hand on his shoulder, the Grand Duke coolly suggests letting little Isle handle her brother instead, leaving the physician utterly dumbfounded. Talk about delegating parenting duties to a 2-year-old. This Duke's confidence in Isle is absurd. Handing the mysterious green vial directly to little Isle, the doctor looks on anxiously while the toddler stares at the medicine, nervously wondering what on earth she's expected to do. Glancing across the room, Isle spots her wild little brother hiding timidly behind the white sofa, trembling in absolute horror at the sight of the medicine. Leaning down to whisper softly into Isle's ear, the Grand Duke reveals a heavy secret. If they fail to suppress the overwhelming draconic energy inside her brother's body with this medicine, his small frame might not survive the strain. Marching straight up to her hiding brother, little Isle firmly holds out the medicine bottle with a serious glare, commanding him to chug it down right this instant. Fixing him with an intense, unyielding stare from her bright green eyes, she makes it crystal clear that running away is no longer an option. Seeing his usually calm sister look so terrifyingly serious, the little boy gulps in complete dread. Chugging down the entire bottle in a single quaff, the young master immediately collapses into his sister's arms for a cozy embrace. Feeling his small heart beating against hers, Isle marvels at the warm, unfamiliar sensation of true family love. While nearby, the Duchess watches thoughtfully, wondering why Isle remains unable to speak, despite having no physical ailments. Addressing maid Molly, the doctor explains that Isle's muteness stems from a deep emotional trauma lingering in her heart, advising that encouraging her to interact with new people will gradually help her heal and open up. Letting out a gentle sigh, the compassionate Duchess expresses her concern, pointing out that forcing Isles into social crowds might overwhelm her, when simply adapting to her new family is already such a massive step. Hearing the doctor's suggestion, the Grand Duke gets a mischievous spark in his eyes, slyly remarking that expanding her horizons sounds like a fantastic plan. Dramatically striking an imperial pose with his hand over his heart, the Grand Duke enthusiastically vows to do whatever it takes to help his precious daughter blossom. Look at him getting all hyped up over a simple outing. The artist's dramatic flair for this family is hilarious. Skipping past the chapter break details, our story immediately continues with little Isle seeking some peace. Sitting quietly at a sunlit study desk with a heavy book, little Isle lets out a relaxed exhale, glad that both her mother and chaotic brother have taken their medicine and drifted off to sleep. Resting her chin on her tiny hands, she smiles softly, reflecting on how living in this warm manner finally allows her to feel like a normal, cherished child, wishing she could remain in this peaceful haven forever. Suddenly, the Grand Duke bursts right into the library like a dramatic hurricane, shouting that remaining inside is out of the question, startling poor little Isle out of her cozy daydream. Striking a tense expression, the Duke urgently declares that a massive, critical event has erupted, and the entire Grand Duchy desperately requires the presence of their young lady. Clenching her tiny fists against her dress, Isle's eyes gasp, ignite with heroic determination as she internally accepts her tragic fate, resolving to throw her tiny body into battle to protect her new realm. Seeing her intense expression, the Duke dramatically nods along, declaring that it's time for her to fulfill her noble duty for the sake of her family and bedridden mother. Throwing his arms open with theatrical flourish, the Duke reveals the top-secret mission, attending the annual local forest festival. Staring blankly at her father, Isle's intense hero persona completely shatters into utter confusion. Seriously? She was preparing for war and he's sending her to a carnival? Riding inside a lavish horse-drawn carriage rolling across scenic green hills, Isle sighs as she recalls the ancient origins of the forest festival, remembering past rumors of it being the grandest celebration in the Western continent. Memories from her previous life flash in her mind, recalling a handsome knight blushing red as he timidly invited her to attend the festival together as a romantic date. Shaking her head to dispel those awkward romantic memories, Isle groans from a headache, only to be suddenly snapped back to reality by her chaotic little brother shoving his face right into hers. Nuzzling his head against her cheek like an affectionate puppy, her brother snuggles close while maid Molly chuckles, explaining that the Grand Duke sent him along because Isle's presence magically calms his wild draconic outbursts, reassuring her that his magic has been safely sealed for the event. As the carriage pulls rumbles to a stop, Molly turns toward the dressed-up toddler twins with a gentle smile, asking if they're ready to step out and explore the bustling festival. Stepping out onto the marble walkway, a majestic sight unfolds as honor guards line the path. Colorful banners flutter in the breeze, and magical winged fairies soar through the bright blue sky to announce their arrival. Cheering townsfolk gather from every corner, waving enthusiastically as floral wreaths and magical decorations light up the grand capital city. Holding Molly's gentle hand as they stroll through the lively market streets, Isle glances back to see her wild brother happily riding atop a tall knight's shoulders like a tiny king. Molly points out the local geography on a detailed map, explaining how the ancient guardian forest has safeguarded the Western realm for over a millennium under the guidance of holy forest spirits. Showing historical illustrations of legendary female warriors, Molly reveals that Isle's bloodline carries the mighty blood of giants, traditionally led by fierce matriarchs who protected the forest with unmatched strength and maternal warmth. Showing a glimpse of the bedridden Duchess continuously managing state affairs from her room, Molly gushes with pride, prompting Isle to internally agree that her mother's incredible work ethic truly deserves respect. Looking around at the vibrant, smiling crowds, Isle compares this joyous environment to the grim, tyrannical empire of her past life, amazed by how genuinely happy and full of life these citizens are. Yet clutching her frilly dress in hesitation, the traumatized toddler feels an awkward distance, wondering how someone carrying centuries of war and betrayal is supposed to blend into such a peaceful, gentle world. Visions of starving, suffering victims from her ancient past overlap with the present, leaving her feeling completely lost on how to interact with people who have never known such tragedy. Sensing her young lady's anxiety, Molly suddenly leans in with a wicked grin, whispering that if she's feeling stressed, they should go on a massive shopping spree and charge everything to the Grand Duke's unlimited tab. Isle's jaw drops in pure shock. Talk about the ultimate cool maid giving terrible financial advice. Suddenly, two sweet young girls step forward holding woven flower crowns, politely asking to bestow the traditional forest blessing upon the young master and lady. The moment the flower crown approaches her head, horrific trauma triggers in Isle's mind, recalling an ancient sacrificial curse forcing her to bleed for an empire. Panicking in absolute horror, the terrified toddler ducks behind Molly's skirt, desperately pleading for them to get those flowers away from her. As the sweet girls complete their prayer to the forest god, wishing for peace and good health, a radiant flower crown is gently set upon Isle's head. The moment it rests on her brow, a soothing, warm energy envelops her tiny frame, instantly melting away her sudden panic. Hugging the toddler tight, Molly assures Isle that someone her age shouldn't carry heavy burdens, urging her to act more like her playful twin brother. But just as Molly points him out, the chaotic boy Chomp Chomp takes a massive bite straight out of his own flower wreath. Well, Molly instantly retracts her advice. Talk about a feral little dragon eating the scenery. Dusting off her skirt, Molly smoothly pivots the conversation, asking if they should dive into some serious retail therapy across the bustling market square. Molly goes on an absolute rampage with the Duke's credit card, picking out ridiculously elaborate frilly dresses before treating Isle to an ice cream tower taller than her entire body. Look at Isle struggling to balance that frozen skyscraper. The artist really went all out on the sheer absurdity of this shopping spree. Knights behind them groan under the crushing weight of endless gift boxes, leaving Isle internally sweating as she realizes Molly's wild spendthrift nature is back in full force. But right in the middle of their shopping extravaganza, a sharp scream suddenly echoes from the main plaza. Turning toward the commotion, Molly notices a massive crowd gathering in the distance, wondering aloud if some grand festival parade is passing through the avenue. Before anyone can react, her wild brother leaps off the knight's shoulders and grabs Isle's hand, dragging her directly into the thick of the crowd. Poor Knight is left screaming in panic as the toddlers bolt into the festival center. Squeezing through the legs of tall citizens, the kids reach the front row, only for Isle's eyes to widen in complete dread as eerie, shadowy blue figures loom right above them. Trauma floods her senses as she remembers her current toddler body possesses zero combative aura or magic to defend herself. Surrounded by monstrous forms, she clutches her head, trembling at the dark thought of meeting an untimely death once more. But instead of attacking, the terrifying specters turn out to be gentle townsfolk. Recognizing the Grand Duke's children, the crowd gasps in warm surprise, frantically calling out for someone to help lift up the lost toddlers. Swooping down with cheerful laughter, the citizens lift both Isle and her brother up on their shoulders so they can easily spot their frantic guardians. Isle blinks in utter disbelief. These aren't bloodthirsty monsters at all, just loving people who genuinely care about her.
Clinging tightly to Molly's neck, Ale shivers with overwhelming sensory overload, terrified by all the eyes focused on her. Seeing her trembling frame, the kind townspeople soften their expressions, gently whispering words of comfort to soothe the frightened young lady. Stepping forward with gentle warmth, a local woman places her hand softly over Isle's back and begins chanting an ancient, melodious forest lullaby. Harmonic magic notes dance through the air, carrying the spirit of wisdom and sweet dreams across the crowd. One by one, the entire crowd joins in unison, singing a sacred blessing for the young lady. As their gentle voices echo around her, Isle feels all the phantom horrors of her past life slowly dissolve under the pure, unconditional affection of these strangers. Surrounded by a sea of blooming white flowers, a soft realization washes over her heart. Unlike the ruthless empire of her past where she stood alone, everyone in this land is ready to cherish and protect her. As night falls over the illuminated capital, the lavish carriage rolls back toward the estate. Inside, both toddlers nestle together asleep, while Molly smiles down at them, snickering, teasingly noting how embarrassed they were after crying in front of the whole town.
Remembering how the villagers showered her with gifts, banquet treats, and festive invitations, Al still struggles to process it all, wondering why anyone would offer such immense love to someone who hasn't earned it. Molly watches her closely, easily reading the lingering hesitation in her young lady's eyes.
Softening her tone, Molly explains that the dramatic festival parade wasn't meant to terrify anyone. It was actually created to honor the legendary 17th princess of the former empire, who heroically slayed a ferocious ice monster 10 years ago when she was just 12 years old. Tears well up in Isle's big green eyes as Molly reveals that the Grand Duke mandated this annual celebration so the realm would never forget the princess's sacrifice. Isle's heart shatters. The very same princess who was abused and discarded in her own empire is revered as a savior here? Wiping away her quiet tears, Isle nods along, relieved that her past sacrifices genuinely protected these innocent souls. But deep down, a sudden wave of suspicion strikes her. Why on earth did Molly choose to tell her that specific legend? Does Molly somehow know her true identity? Noticing Isle staring at her, Molly giggles playfully, patting the toddler's head and encouraging her to simply enjoy her new life, explore countless future festivals, and fill her eyes with beautiful memories. Looking up with genuine gratitude, Isle gives a quiet, heartfelt thank you to her loyal maid. Seriously, guys, Molly is easily top-tier nanny material. She handles cosmic dragon toddlers and ancient reincarnated princesses without breaking a sweat. Back in the quiet library, Isle sits with her flower crown, sifting through fuzzy memories of her past life. She distinctly recalls rescuing refugees on the frozen ice fields, but the exact faces and identities remain shrouded in a heavy mist. Ever since her reincarnation into this new frame, key details from her former life have felt fragmented and out of reach, almost as if an intentional veil was placed over her past recollections. Staring into the void of her mind, she sees towering, shadowy figures surrounding her past self, leaving her with an unsettling hunch that she's completely forgotten crucial people who meant the world to her. That empty, hollow feeling in her chest grows stronger. She knows for a fact that vital comrades or loved ones from her previous life have been erased from her memory bank. Determined to crack the mystery, the sharp toddler sits quietly at her study desk, meticulously piecing together every clue she has gathered so far. She reflects on her new family, twins born with ancient draconic power, a fierce mother who loves them unconditionally, and a duke father whose subtle habits and gestures feel strangely nostalgic. The pieces of the cosmic puzzle begin aligning. She starts realizing that her rebirth into this exact grand ducal family wasn't a random accident, but a destiny tied directly to her lost past. Flipping through heavy historical scrolls, Isle groans after realizing the oppressive empire systematically destroyed all text on soul reincarnation. Heavy sigh, forcing her to comb through ancient history books instead. Whenever she tries questioning her chaotic little brother, he just gives her that iconic zero thoughts empty dragon stare, leaving her wondering if she's simply overanalyzing everything. Even though her father cryptically shushes her whenever she digs too deep, her relentless research finally pays off as her eyes land on a hidden ancient text. According to ancient dragon lore, dragons created by gods possess absolute free will upon death, choosing either to pass down their divine core or reincarnate into a new form of their own choosing.
Her eyes widen as the truth hits her. Her unruly twin brother isn't just a toddler with stray dragon magic, he is the literal reincarnation of an ancient dragon. But which legendary beast was he in his past life? Her mind instantly flashes to Dio, her powerful dragon companion from her past life. But she quickly shakes her head. Dio was an absolute unit. There's no way he could have fallen in battle, especially after swearing a promise to fly far away before her death. Right? Unbeknownst to little Isle, her parents stand outside the library door quietly watching their tiny daughter read heavy tome after heavy tome with a mix of heartache and pride. Clutching her hands together, the Duchess turns to her husband in deep anxiety, unable to endure seeing their precious daughter suffer while desperately trying to unlock her locked memories. Holding his wife gently, the Duke urges patience, revealing a huge plot secret. Once Isle reaches her 3rd birthday, the Divine Seal will naturally break and uncover everything. Until then, their mission is to shower her with unconditional love and build her strength. Nodding softly, the Duchess agrees that before the grand ritual seal shatters, they must protect her childhood at all costs. Embracing his wife in the warm sunlight, the Duke vows to fill every single day with endless affection. Seriously, can we talk about how wholesome this parental duo is? They're literally plotting an intervention of pure love. Back at her desk, as Isle reaches the end of another chapter, a gentle hand suddenly reaches out and slides a brand new historical volume directly onto her desk. Looking up in surprise, Isle sees her gorgeous mother standing over her with a warm, loving smile, holding out the exact book she was searching for. With gentle eyes, the Duchess softly offers the text, silently supporting her daughter's thirst for knowledge without intruding on her space. Isle stammers in slight embarrassment, amazed at how her mother always seems to intuitively know what she needs before she even asks. Cut to a sunny afternoon outside on the lush estate grounds. An outdoor patrol has officially morphed into a full-blown family picnic under a grand umbrella canopy. While the Duchess sips fresh tea, the chaotic little brother rides the poor knight like a pony near the pond, cheering wildly while the knight promises to reel in a massive prize fish. Talk about a hard-working bodyguard taking his babysitting duties to the absolute extreme. Sitting under the shade of a tall tree, sipping cold lemonade, Isle sighs as her father sits beside her, teasingly pointing out her pouty expression. Isle internally grumbles. He promised she had the right to refuse, yet somehow she gets dragged into every single family outing anyway. Labeling her doting father a total liar, she watches him dramatically clasp his hands and offer dramatic prayers to the forest goddess, overflowing with joy over how much more expressive his daughter has become. Leaning in with a gentle smile, the Duke offers to share a bit of fatherly wisdom now that she's being so delightfully candid with him. Softly reassuring her, he tells her there's no need to rush to uncover every answer about her existence. She can figure out her path piece by piece, while savoring peaceful moments like these. Isle blinks her giant green eyes, trying to decipher his cryptic yet tender advice. Kneeling down beside the blooming meadow flowers, her father speaks with quiet sincerity, explaining that true family means placing unwavering trust in one another forever. Little Isle blinks her giant green eyes, completely caught off guard by his deep words. Holding a simple daisy close to his chest, the Duke flashes a soft, reassuring smile, reiterating that real trust is a lifelong bond. Right below, her mother waves gently, with pure warmth radiating from her entire expression. Meanwhile, absolute chaos breaks out near the pond as her chaotic twin brother Adamon swings wildly from a knight's fishing pole. Seriously, can we appreciate how this poor guard is forced to play human amusement park ride for a dragon toddler? Twirling a tiny flower in her small fingers, Isle sinks into deep thought, questioning if a broken soul like hers truly deserves to belong in such an affectionate household. But right as she ponders her existence, a terrifying giant hornet drops directly from above. Both Isle and her father freeze in total shock as they look up to find a massive, angry hornet's nest swaying directly above their heads. Reacting in pure survival instinct, her panicked father scoops Isle into his arms and yells for his wife to protect the children. Swinging into action, the Duchess hugs her daughter tight while yelling for Adamon to ignite his dragon flames. Hearing his mother's command, little Idamon cries out, "Owie!" as a wild burst of dragon fire erupts around his small body. The fiery blast flies straight upward, blasting the hornet nest directly off the tree branch. The blazing nest plummets through the air with a swift drop, crashing violently into the thick bushes below. Right on cue, a massive, angry wild bear emerges from the foliage, roaring in absolute fury with a giant swollen lump on its forehead and its paw on fire. Her parents gasp in horror, realizing their toddler's dragon fire just accidentally summoned a raid boss. Watching the entire chaotic scene unfold, little Isle clutches her dress gloomily, convincing herself that she brings bad luck to everyone around her. Talk about having peak protagonist trauma brain. She literally thinks a wild bear attack is her fault. Sensing her tiny daughter's distress, the Duchess pulls her close, softly acknowledging that while she might not always know the perfect soothing words to say, her mother's aura flares up with dramatic purple electric energy. Refusing to be a failure as a parent, she turns toward the beast with fierce determination, calling out to make sure her daughter is watching closely. Joining the fray, her father summons a majestic flying red dragon magic construct, while her mother unleashes raw lightning power. Together, both parents charge forward to pulverize the wild bear, swearing to protect their precious daughter for the rest of their lives. Honestly, using high-tier tactical magic against a random forest bear is top-tier overprotective parenting. Held safely in Molly's arms, Isle watches in total awe as her chest throbs with an overwhelming wave of warmth. Tears spring into her bright green eyes as a soft blush spreads across her cheeks. For the very first time since her rebirth, she feels genuine pride in being part of this ridiculously devoted family. Cradled gently against her loyal maid's shoulder, Isle buries her face and whispers a quiet, heartfelt thank you to everyone around her. Taking in the ridiculous sight, the glasses-wearing maid deadpans, wondering if the master and mistress are overreacting a bit too much, while in the background, the Duke, Duchess, and little Idamon are straight up jumping the bear, with the toddler literally biting the monster's ear. Look at this little menace taking a chunk out of a bear. Looking on with a tearful, tender smile, Isle finally understands the true, comforting feeling of having a real family. Sometime later back at the estate, a heavily armored guard stands at attention, holding his spear, reporting to the Duchess that important visitors have arrived and are waiting inside the residence. Adjusting her collar thoughtfully, the Duchess notes that their guests hover from the prestigious Wolfgang Duchy. Displaying the iconic winged wolf crest, the visitors are none other than Grand Duke Guard Wolfgang and his young heir, Brel. Memories instantly flood Isle's sharp mind. The Wolfgang clan warriors blessed by the god of the canyon carrying the bloodline of the mythical wolf. In her previous life, they were the fiercest faction to subdue, acting as legendary battle heroes revered by commoners for resisting imperial tyranny. Recalling her past as a warrior princess, she remembers being forced into bitter conflict against them by the Empire. Though she respected their valor, she carried deep resentment because the Wolfgang Principality was the exact territory where the fourth princess, Modai, was ambushed by magical beasts while traveling for a marriage and lost her life. Despite having troops nearby, the Wolfgang army refused to take responsibility or assist in searching for her remains. Dressed in her elaborate yellow gown, little Isle walks through the grand hallway, her brow furrowed with deep suspicion toward these incoming guests. Stepping into the lavish reception room, her mother greets her with open arms, calling Isle over to introduce her to the noble visitors. But sitting lounged on the sofa, Grand Duke Guard Wolfgang scoffs arrogantly, loudly complaining about waiting and mockingly asking if this little brat is supposed to be the Grand Duchy's young lady. Wow, talk about making a terrible first impression. A detailed close-up reveals Guard Wolfgang in all his haughty glory, wearing a sharp ponytail and a condescending gaze. Standing proudly beside him is his young son, Brel. Watching them closely, Isle internally scowls, instantly disliking their arrogant presence even more. As Guard stares her down like target prey, Isle stands her ground, glaring right back with zero fear in her eyes. Noticing her defiant posture, Guard smirks with amusement at her spirited gaze. Keeping up his tough front, the Grand Duke scoffs that a fierce look won't earn his forgiveness so easily. Little Isle clutches her hands, completely bewildered by his bizarre attitude. Striking a dramatic pose with his hand over his heart, Guard dramatically proclaims that the young lady's lack of a proper greeting is unacceptable. However, if she calls him uncle, accepts his extravagant gifts, and lets him give her a huge hug, he might consider forgiving her. Chibi Isle stands completely frozen in utter disbelief, her eyes turning into blank void dots as her brain reboots. Sweating profusely, her father remarks that Lord Guard hasn't changed a bit, while her mother sighs in deep exasperation. Hearing them talk, Isle blinks in confusion, wondering what history they share.
Guard continues his dramatic rant, complaining that a child born of giant blood shouldn't be this frail, claiming a forest mage can't raise a child right, and proposing to kidnap her to his duchy for Spartan training. Unsurprisingly, both parents scream at him to shut his mouth. Snapping in defensive fury, the Duke and Duchess embrace each other tightly, warning him never to utter such nonsense about stealing their darling daughter. A side note reveals the hilarious truth. Guard has 3 sons and is desperately jealous because he never got a daughter. Seriously, this dude is just a closeted girl dad suffering from severe envy. Grinding his teeth in tsundere frustration, Guard growls about how unfair it is that a useless couple got a cute daughter. Watching them bicker back and forth, Isle's sweat drops, realizing these high nobles are actually chaotic childhood friends. Stepping forward with smooth elegance, young Brel Wolfgang reassures Isle that his father is just weirdly affectionate. Kneeling politely, he introduces himself as Brel and bows with refined grace. Taking her tiny hand into his, young Brel gently places a soft kiss on her knuckles, declaring a sudden sense of deep kinship and asking permission to become her personal knight. Hold on a minute. This kid is pulling out full romance protagonist moves at 7 years old. In the background, her mother swoons over how romantic it is, while her father panics in total outrage. Meanwhile, Isle stares down at Brel, suddenly hit by an inexplicable wave of deep nostalgia. Staring into his eyes, she senses a familiar warmth. His gaze and essence bear a striking resemblance to the late Princess Modai, buried under a field of daisies. Suddenly, little Idamon charges in out of nowhere, yanking Isle's hand away and screaming, "No knight, my sister!" at the top of his lungs. Isle's eyes widen in shock. Her little dragon brother just spoke full coherent sentences out of pure jealousy. Regaining her composure, little Isle nods right along with her brother, sternly declaring that Brel's sudden proposal was completely inappropriate. Squatting down between the kids, Guard scolds his son, claiming a true knight should be mature like him. He then arrogantly claims that their wolf bloodline strictly forbids strangers from touching young clan members. Leaning down with a smug smirk, Guard holds out his own head and tells her that if she wants to touch someone, she should touch her elder instead. Little Isle's jaw drops to the floor in absolute shock. Her father screams at Guard for being a terrible role model. Her mother facepalms in shame, and Adamon throws a full toddler tantrum. Ignoring the room, Guard scoops Isle high into the air, cheering about how adorable girls are while claiming her as his own. Her parents scream in the background for him to stop stealing their child. Gently patting her head, Guard hands over a pile of extravagant presents, instructing her to play nicely while the adults talk. Watching him walk away, Isle internally admits that, despite his eccentric behavior, he's genuinely a warm-hearted uncle. Turning to her parents, Guard softly commends them, admitting that they've raised a smart and adorable child. Her mother proudly puffs her chest, taking full credit. Teasingly winking, her mother jabs that Isle is the daughter he's been dying of envy over for years. Flustered, Guard turns away growling, telling her to shut up about it already. Y'all, the banter between these families is absolute gold. Dropping the lighthearted mood, her father adjusts his necktie, turning serious as he asks what critical matter brought the Grand Duke all this way. Guard's expression darkens as he reveals that the imperial throne is under fierce contest once again. Exasperated, her father notes this is the 5th succession war in just 4 years. Guard solemnly explains that the political turmoil, harsh taxations, and endless refugee crises are spilling over into their lands. And worse yet, reports confirm the emperor left 0 direct heirs to claim the crown. Meanwhile, back in the imperial capital, politics are spiraling out of control as nobles debate who should inherit the throne. Due to conflicting interests, the council ends up nominating none other than Dark Aurel, the 9-year-old younger brother of the late 17th princess. On paper, the kid was supposed to be a sickly, timid little prince who only ever talked to his stuffed animals. Back then, he was terrified of everyone except his beloved big sister, whom the 17th princess cared for like a true younger sibling. Sitting together at a sunlit tea table, the Grand Duke and Duchess listen intently to their visitor's update, their expressions darkening as the political reality sinks in. But according to top-secret informants, this kid is anything but harmless. Anyone who dared to oppose his succession mysteriously died within days, losing their minds and taking their own lives under terrifying circumstances. Talk about a whole new level of nightmare child royalty. Beneath that innocent facade of hugging plush toys hides a monster capable of summoning evil spirits across the entire continent. It turns out the imperial bloodline maintains its 400-year rule through the legendary world-waking commandment, a divine power allowing mind manipulation, spirit summoning, and pure magic of extinction. While the late 17th princess possessed the magic of extinction, this young boy inherited mind control and spirit summoning.
Even though the Empire's territory is separated by vast mountain ranges, the visitor reassures the Duke that their ironclad alliance will hold strong against any Imperial threat. But then comes the real bombshell. The informant reveals that the new emperor has launched a nationwide manhunt to track down the reincarnated soul of the 17th princess. Hearing the word reincarnation drops the Duke and Duchess into absolute shock. Seeing the Duchess panic, the visitor urges her to stay calm. He reminds them that because they supported the past rebellion, they remain permanently blacklisted under Imperial surveillance. Man, the political web here is getting crazier by the second. Leaning across the table, the visitor urges them not to underestimate his faction's true military strength, placing a reassuring hand near the worried couple. He points out that his own wife holds a very special status, guaranteeing that if they entrust the reincarnated child to his care, she will be completely safe from Imperial assassins. But the Duchess instantly refuses, sitting up with fierce determination and declaring that she could never abandon her child. Holding her husband's hand tightly, she vows that no matter what dangers lie ahead, she will never leave her daughter's side. Honestly, seeing this mother's lioness instinct protect her baby is so heartwarming. Clenching his fist with a bright grin, the visiting lord swears on his honor that the Wolfgang Principality will do whatever it takes to protect their entire family until the child grows up strong and awakens. With the tense discussion settled, the Duke gently comforts his tearful wife, warmly proposing that they head over together to check on little Isle. Suddenly remembering an important detail, the visiting lord turns back to mention that he already arranged for vital supplies to be smuggled directly from the Empire. He lowers his voice to warn them solemnly, reminding them to handle the incoming shipment with extreme caution so Imperial spies don't catch wind of it. With a relieved smile, the Duchess thanks him from the bottom of her heart for going to such lengths for their safety. Meanwhile, over in the courtyard, Maid Molly arrives with the young master, bringing little Isle and her twin brother together to meet their guest son. But when Isle looks over at the pile of gifts, her jaw literally drops. The guy didn't just send toys, he sent plushies, jewel-encrusted daggers, hunting bows, a trained hawk, a luxury carriage, canyon war horses, and 12 entire dairy cows. Okay, talk about the ultimate flex of rich uncle energy. As Isle's sweat drops over the massive pile, Maid Molly gets stars in her eyes, excitedly pitching a plan to spend the Grand Duke's money on a 3-story magic warehouse to store all the loot. Noticing Isle's overwhelmed expression, the visiting boy nervously steps forward, asking if she dislikes his father's extravagant presents. When he dramatically calls his own dad a fool for choosing such ridiculous items, Isle tries to clear up the misunderstanding, while her twin brother steps in to guard her as the young boy pledges his knightly loyalty. Stroking his shimmering blue brooch with a gentle smile, the young boy looks into her eyes with pure sincerity. Folding his tiny hands together politely, he prepares to convey a message straight from his heart. He signs with his fingers that if these gifts bring her joy, then he is happy. Watching his precise movements, Isle freezes in complete shock, realizing he just used the exact sign language her past life teacher Modai taught her. Seeing tears well up in her eyes, the boy panics, wondering if his signing was terrible, while Isle tries to process the overwhelming wave of nostalgic memories rushing back. Gathering her courage, little Isle carefully moves her hands, signing back to ask him directly who taught him those specific signs. The young boy's eyes go wide with astonishment, completely caught off guard by the toddler signing back to him with flawless accuracy. Seeing his stunned silence, Isle instantly feels a pinch of regret, worrying that she shouldn't have pried into his personal life. But the boy breaks into a radiant smile, explaining that he learned sign language directly from his mother after hearing the young lady of the principalities couldn't speak. Man, this kid literally learned a whole nonverbal language just to talk to her. Intrigued by the connection to her past life, Isle desperately tries to ask more about his mother, but stumbles over her rusty signing skills. Looking down at her tiny hands, self-doubt creeps back into her thoughts, making her feel frustrated for being so clumsy. Sensing her anxiety, the sweet young boy gently takes her hands into his own, reassuring her with utmost gentleness. He warmly shares that his mother always told him that true feelings overflow through a person's eyes and smile. He promises to tell her everything about his mother whenever she wants to listen. Gently tapping her cheek, he reminds her that there's no need to rush, encouraging her to take all all the time she needs to learn and communicate comfortably. He passes along his mother's beautiful words that Lady Isle was born with the blessings of the entire world and that any dream she wishes for can come true. Listening to those comforting words, Isle's heart fills with profound peace as she realizes she is surrounded by a loving family, loyal relatives, and genuine companions. Clenching her fists with quiet resolve, she vows to work hard and grow into someone everyone around her can be truly proud of. As the adults walk out into the hallway, the visiting lord casually asks if they would ever consider entrusting the young princess to his grand duchy. The Duke and Duchess instantly snap into chibi mode, shouting a unanimous absolutely not at the top of their lungs. Seriously, no one is stealing their precious baby girl today. Later that afternoon, Maid Molly holds a delicate umbrella over little Isle as the toddler carefully navigates the grand marble staircase while holding a magic medicine bottle. Passing by in the courtyard, two housemaids bow respectfully, cheerfully wishing the young lady a wonderful day. Stopping in her tracks, Tiny Isle blinks her huge green eyes as she looks up at the hard-working estate staff. She softly offers a cute little nod, returning their greeting with a sweet gesture. The two maids instantly turn into a puddle of mush giggle, clutching their cheeks in pure adoration as they squeal over how insanely cute her little smile is. They immediately start bickering back and forth over who Isle was actually smiling at, both claiming total victory. Watching the hilarious exchange, Maid Molly chuckles warmly under her parasol, remarking how literally everyone in the castle adores the young princess. Molly then gently reminds Isle that they need to deliver the new magic medicine directly to the Grand Duke over at the night training grounds. Helping the little princess up the wooden steps, Molly guides her inside the luxurious white carriage waiting outside. Sitting comfortably on the plush velvet seats, little Isle gazes out the window, reflecting on how massive and peaceful her new home is, finally feeling the sweet taste of true freedom. What a satisfying character moment to end on. Carrying her precious little lady down the sunlit corridor, gentle voice, the maid announces softly that they have finally arrived at their destination. Little Isle sits comfortably cradled in her maid's arms, clutching a small glass bottle of magic medicine while looking around with wide, curious eyes. Stepping into the training courtyard, she spots her mother, Duchess Jen, engaged in a fierce sword battle against Grand Duke Guard Wolfgang. In the background, her father claps his hands with genuine cheer, shouting for his beloved wife to give it her absolute best. Isle blinks in surprise, realizing they're actually in the middle of a full-blown sparring match. Watching the blades clash, distant memories immediately flood Isle's mind. She recalls her previous life as a warrior princess, routinely sharpening her combat skills alongside trusted comrades on the battlefield. Gently resting a hand atop her head, her mother asks what's wrong. Isle looks down thoughtfully. Her past memories are still fragmented due to amnesia, leaving the fine details frustratingly out of reach. Y'all, having legendary warrior reflexes trapped in a toddler's body with memory loss must be so trippy. Bending down with a gentle, worried look, her father asks if she's feeling unwell. Little Ale quickly shakes her head, assuring him that she's totally fine. Her bright green eyes sparkle as she looks up, silently studying her father's caring face. Offering a sweet, reassuring smile, her father gazes back at her with pure paternal affection. Turning back toward the courtyard, Duchess Jen pants heavily while leaning against her massive sword. She angrily accuses Guard of playing dirty by targeting her from a distance when she isn't at full strength. Guard just smirks back, teasing that she hasn't trained with real opponents in ages and shouldn't hold back. Smuggling a proud grin, Guard boasts that pursuit tactics and swift counterattacks are the time-honored combat techniques of the Wolfgang Grand Duchy. Suddenly, the Duchess groans in agony, clutching her lower back as a sharp pain shoots straight through her spine. Her husband immediately steps up, wagging a disappointed finger at Guard for pushing her too far. Look at this legendary swordswoman getting defeated by sudden lower back pain. Relatable content right here. Her father rushes over to support her, urging her to sit down and rest. Right on cue, little Isle waddles up, holding out a bottle of magic medicine. Moved to tears, the Duchess forgets her back pain entirely and scoops Isle into a tight, smothering hug, crying out that seeing her sweet daughter instantly cured all her pain. Watching the touching family display, Guard pouts dramatically in chibi form, sulking over how intentionally they're showing off their adorable doting dynamic. Wanting another turn to play, Guard demands a rematch, but the Duke steps in front of his wife, firmly calling an end to the session since Jen's body has barely recovered from a recent illness. Holding her potion bottle model, little Isle mentally agrees with her father. Even during routine training, her mother really needs to ease back into intense physical activity. Suddenly, Guard tosses a wooden sword to the ground, grinning mischievously as he asks Isle if she wants to avenge her mother. He proposes switching to harmless wooden weapons for a quick round. Isle stares down at the toy blade, internally groaning because she genuinely hates unnecessary fighting. Both parents instantly panic, screaming at Aile that she has every right to refuse and doesn't have to fight if she doesn't want to. Guard scoffs arrogant insults, claiming children in his duchy never decline a challenge and mocking whether the Simonstas family only produces weaklings. Wow! Using classic peer pressure on a toddler? Guard really has no chill. Driven by pure stubborn pride, little Isle reaches down and grips the wooden sword hilt tightly, resolving not to back down. Seeing her pick up the weapon, both parents let out horrified gasps. Standing tall with her toy sword raised, the majestic, towering phantom aura of her past life's grand warrior persona flares behind her. Isle glares forward with absolute, terrifying determination. Watching the intense phantom aura emanate from their tiny daughter, her parents cover their mouths in complete, speechless horror. Guard's eyes light up with dark excitement as he flares his own powerful aura, thrilled by the fierce battle spirit glowing in her gaze. But the moment Isle takes a single menacing step forward, Guard abruptly drops to one knee and raises his hands, dramatically announcing his complete surrender. Gently patting Isle's head, Guard praises her warmly, admitting that even he didn't possess such fiery spirit at her age, officially declaring her the winner. Okay, hold up. This huge, intimidating battle warrior just got completely intimidated by a toddler's murderous glare. Talk about top-tier comedic anticlimax. Leaning down close, Guard whispers into her ear while Chibi Isle stands completely frozen with blank, uncomprehending eyes. Staring down at her wooden weapon, Isle internally sighs. She didn't even want to participate in a dummy fight in the first place. Rushing over like protective shields, her mother kneels beside her while her father stands guard, firmly reiterating that she never has to do anything she doesn't want to do. Turning serious, the Duchess informs her husband that she needs to have a private, important discussion with the Grand Duke. Nodding solemnly, the Duke scoops Isle safely into his arms. Carrying Isle away, her father glares back while her mother addresses Guard in an unusually cold, formal tone. Sensing the sudden drop in temperature, Isle feels a heavy chill in the air, wondering if everything is truly all right between them. Turning to face Guard with a fierce, deadly serious expression, the Duchess sternly orders him never to let Isle near weapons or violent combat ever again. Crossing his arms as he watches them depart, Guard's eyes narrow thoughtfully. He remembers her terrifying aura and realizes that if the dark rumors circulating across the Empire are true, keeping her incredible latent power hidden from the world is going to become nearly impossible very soon. Sometime later inside the lavish parlor, Guard, little Adamon, Brel, and Isle gather around a chess table. Guard cheers enthusiastically, praising Isle as a prodigy for grasping the rules instantly and winning her very first game. Standing nearby, her parents watch in awe. Her mother asks if Isle really won, while her father strokes his chin in pure admiration, marveling at her exquisite tactical board position. But despite her victory, little Isle hangs her head in quiet sorrow. She internally laments that strategic warfare and tactical maneuvering were the only thing she ever mastered in her tragic past life, and winning like this only reminds her of what she lost. Noticing her slumping posture, Guard leans over the table to check on her. Poking a finger toward her, Guard loudly demands to know why she looks so utterly depressed after securing a total victory. Stepping closer with a dark, stern shadow over his face, Guard gruffly admits that he absolutely hates seeing such a gloomy look on her cute little face. Realizing her strange melancholy, Guard decides to change the topic to help cheer up the quiet young lady. Honestly, under that rough warrior exterior, Uncle Guard is secretly a giant softie. Across the room, young Bral and little Idamon sit opposite each other, locked in an intense mini-chess match of their own. Holding Isle comfortably in his arms, her father points toward the boys, smiling warmly, as he shows her that Adamon is trying his best to play chess too. Sweat dripping down his forehead, toddler Adamon stares intensely at the board, completely baffled by the complex pieces, while Brel sits calmly with a smug smile. Adamon grabs a pawn and tries to slam it onto a random square, but Brel instantly blocks his hand, pointing out politely that he can't make that illegal move. Adamon picks up another piece, only for Brel to stop him again. Driven by pure chaos, Adamon tries moving a knight straight across the board, but Brel firmly rejects every single illegal move with a polite shake of his head, Reaching for the king piece next, Adaman tries to brute force his way to victory, but Brel flat out denies him once more. Trembling with absolute rage, Idaman's little face contorts into a furious glare, while Brill just sits there offering a calm, "Oh." Completely snapping in frustration, toddler Adaman opens his mouth wide and breathes a literal jet stream of roaring dragon fire straight into Brel's face. Y'all, Bro literally got checkmated and decided to turn the chess match into a barbecue. Covered head to toe in black suit with his hair standing on end, poor Brel sweat drops, chuckling awkwardly as he gently points out that using dragon fire during chess is definitely against the official rules. Throwing a massive toddler tantrum, crying, Adaman waves his tiny arms hysterically, screaming at the top of his lungs about how much he utterly hates chess. Suddenly, a soft, delicate hand gently reaches out and pats his mess of blonde hair. Leaning down with a sweet, comforting smile, little Isle tenderly strokes her brother's head, softly warning him that if he makes this much noise, everyone in the entire estate will hear his furious shouting. Gently holding her brother in a soothing embrace, little Ale sighs softly, realizing Adaman is still just a helpless toddler. Guard steps over, pointing out that Brel is a renowned chess grandmaster in their duchy, so losing was practically guaranteed. He then wagged a finger at Adaman, scolding him that unleashing dragonfire mid-game is strictly forbidden and demanding a proper apology. Brel pats his chest with a bright, forgiving smile, assuring everyone that it's totally all right since he adores honest, expressive kids like Adaman. Turning toward Isle, young Brel politely asks if Lady Isle would like to learn how to play chess as well. Caught off guard by the offer, little Isle points to herself with wide, innocent eyes. Brel offers a charming bow, eagerly promising to guide her through every single rule step by step. Clasping her small hands together, Isle hesitates nervously, mentally stressing over how terrible she usually is at complex tabletop games. Brel gestures gracefully toward the board, explaining that each piece possesses its own distinct movement pattern, calmly encouraging her to ask questions whenever she feels confused. Both Isle and Adaman tilt their heads in chibi confusion, staring blankly at the board as their minds go completely blank. Honestly, watching two tiny toddlers try to process high-level strategy is pure comedy gold. Little Isle internally panics, worrying that despite Brel's careful explanation, she isn't catching on at all and might end up disappointing him. Kneeling beside her, her father offers a reassuring smile, telling Brel would never judge her so she can take things slow and just start by learning piece names.
Duchess Jen chimes in warmly, agreeing that there is zero rush. Right on cue, the estate maid enters carrying a tray loaded with tea and delicious cakes, inviting everyone to enjoy a relaxing snack break. As treats are distributed around the parlor, little Isle gazes down at the grid, feeling a strange disconnect deep within her mind. Crossing his arms arrogantly, Guard interrupts, complaining that overcomplicating something simple is terrible teaching. Isle internally groans. Here comes Uncle Guard with his unsolicited lectures again. Leaning in close, Guard whispers with intense gravity, telling her to pay close attention if she actually wants to achieve victory. Guard asserts boldly that games like chess aren't just leisure. They are best understood as raw, tactical battlefields. He urges her to command the pieces like a supreme general, explaining that every unit has a unique fighting style and attack range. Suddenly, massive phantom soldiers wielding swords and spears materialize around little Isle as his words click in her mind. Hearing strategy reframed as military warfare, Isle's warrior instincts immediately activate. She overlays her past life's real battle experience directly onto the board, calculating movement ranges in a split second. Analyzing speed, defense, and bottleneck points, whose strategic mind rapidly constructs complex ambush formations across the squares. Slamming her final piece down with a blinding golden flash, the majestic, glowing phantom of her past warrior self flares behind her as she calmly declares, checkmate. Talk about going from complete novice to master strategist in 5 seconds flat. Guard's jaw drops in shock, while the rest of the room stands completely dumbfounded by her brilliant maneuver. But as the excitement of winning fades, dark chains and withered blue roses entwine Isle's thoughts, echoing harsh whispers from her forgotten past. She remembers the cruel insults hurled by imperial nobles during her previous life as a warrior princess, calling her a hypocritical monster for showing mercy to fallen enemies on the battlefield. Painful memories flood her mind of critics branding her high and mighty, accusing her of treason, and wishing for her death. Heartache heavy in her tiny chest, little Isle turns away, unable to face the painful reminders of her blood-soaked past.
Breaking into a desperate dash, Isle runs straight out of the parlor room. Her parents leap up in panic, calling out her name while the boys watch in complete shock.
Guard scratches his cheek, sweat dropping in total confusion over why a chess victory made her burst into tears and flee. Furious over her sister's sadness, toddler Idamon charges forward and violently kicks Guard's leg, screaming at him for being a terrible bully. Hoisting the fiery toddler up by his collar, Guard scolds him for misbehaving, but Idamon flails his arms madly, shouting that Guard made his big sister cry. Man, Idamon being the ultimate protective little brother is so wholesome. Young Brel steps forward, sternly lecturing his own father that careless words can deeply wound someone, leaving Guard completely floored at being scolded by his son. Turning cold and serious, Duchess Jen orders the maid to look after the boys while commanding Guard to follow her into the private hallway. Standing face to face near the grand window, awkward chuckles, Guard stammers awkwardly under his sister-in-law's intense glare. Duchess Jen sternly reprimands him, reminding Guard that she explicitly warned him about Al's fragile emotional state. Clucking her chest with deep maternal grief, Jen explains that while the rituals seal erased Al's personal memories of her family, her traumatic past life memories still trigger easily, and bringing back those dark horrors through thoughtless banter is unacceptable. Guard stands completely silent, sweat dripping down his temple as the full weight of his blunder hits him. Jen softens her voice slightly, pointing out that even young Brel and little Idamon recognized how delicate Isle is and tried their best to be thoughtful. She explains that as her guardians, they must put in extra effort to protect her heart. Placing a hand over his chest, Guard nods solemnly, taking full responsibility. Guard bows his head deeply, sincerely promising to strictly guard his tongue and handle the little princess with extreme care from now on. Relieved by his genuine remorse, Duchess Jen offers a gentle smile, thanking him softly for understanding. Meanwhile, Duke Samunstis strolls through the quiet grand library, calling out softly for his missing daughter. Scanning near the lower bookshelves, he spots an adorable, suspicious little mound hiding under a blue patterned blanket. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, her father playfully asks if the duchy's precious little princess is hiding under there, tapping the fabric lightly. Hiding in the dark space underneath, little Isle wipes her teary eyes, surprised by how fast her father tracked her down. Her father speaks with endless gentleness, promising that even if she isn't ready to come out, he will sit right beside her for as long as she needs, asking only for a tiny sign to know she's safe. Inside the blanket, little Isle wriggles her tiny body twice, sending cute ripples through the fabric. Seeing her adorable response, her father smiles brightly, thanking her softly for the sweet signal. He asks gently if she feels lonely sitting all by herself in the dark hiding spot. Channeling a soft trickle of nature magic, warm green light glows around his palm as he asks if she'd like a pretty flower to keep her company. Overwhelmed by his affection, little Isle gasps softly, her heavy heart melting from his loving care. Slowly reaching out, her tiny hand pulls back the edge of the blanket. Holding the freshly bloomed white flower against her chest, little Isle looks up with tearful eyes, softly apologizing for hiding like a selfish child. Reaching down, her father gently cups her cheek, reassuring her with pure paternal devotion that she did nothing wrong and never has to apologize for her feelings. Isle blinks in quiet awe, realizing just how deeply cherished she truly is in this new life. Sitting beside his trembling daughter, Duke Samunstis speaks with deep compassion, reassuring little Isle that even if Guard is her mother's relative, she never has to force herself to spend time with anyone who makes her uncomfortable. Before he can finish, tiny Isle gently reaches up and places her cute palm over her father's lips, softly hushing him and reminding him that he shouldn't speak poorly of his trusted friends. Softening his expression, her father chuckles warm-heartedly, praising Isle for her sweet nature while gently advising her not to strain herself and to focus only on joyful thoughts. Clutching her delicate white flower, little Isle gazes down with a serious expression, explaining that Uncle Guard didn't actually do anything malicious. It was simply the sharp tone he used that triggered painful memories from her past. Her father nods in understanding, asking if Guard's loud voice accidentally unearthed traumatic echoes from her previous life. Isle looks down thoughtfully, realizing that what truly terrified her wasn't Guard's speech, but the gloomy, blood-soaked person she used to be. Sweeping her into a tender hug, her father wraps his strong arms around her tiny frame, providing the warm, safe haven she desperately needed after facing her dark past.
But right when the atmosphere turns completely wholesome, her father lets out a sudden loud cough, instantly shattering the dramatic emotional mood. Man, leave it to a dad cough to completely ruin a tender moment. Transitioning back to the main parlor, the family gathers around the table where Guard sits fidgeting nervously under everyone's intense, judging glares. Standing behind Isle's chair, Duchess Jen and Simon Stuss stare at Guard with severe expressions, softly whispering a sarcastic good luck as he prepares to deliver his formal apology to the toddler. Clearing his throat awkwardly, Guard leans across the table with a stiff bow, stammering out that he wishes to offer a sincere apology but first needs to clarify a few important details. Leaning in close, Guard attempts to construct a bizarre piece of twisted logic, claiming that by calling the children weak, he actually forced her to let her guard down on purpose. Little Isle tilts her head in complete, utter confusion. Question marks literally float around her parents' heads as both Duke Simonistus and Duchess Jen stare at Guard with totally deadpan, bewildered faces. Honestly, watching him dig his own grave with this terrible excuse is top-tier comedy. Restlessly stroke his chin, Guard continues digging himself into a deeper hole, asserting that in the Wolfgang Grand Duchy, nobody would ever misunderstand his brilliant tactical intentions. The moment Guard blabbers that no child in his duchy is as difficult to understand as Isle, Duchess Jen completely loses her mind, raising a fist to beat him while her husband frantically holds her back. Guard panics, slamming his hands down and screaming at the top of his lungs that he begs for her forgiveness. Sweating nervously at the chaotic adult drama unfolding before her, Chibi Isle groans internally, sigh, muttering to herself about how much she utterly dislikes the entire Wolfgang family. Burying his face in his hands in absolute shame, Guard laments that his wife constantly scolds him for being overly blunt. He hastily assures Isle that while he disliked her gloomy expression, he never intended to reject her as a person. Pointing a dramatic finger into the air, Guard asserts boldly that Isle is drastically underestimating her own inner potential, leaving Isle and her parents blinking in total shock. Launching into an impassioned sermon while an angelic Chibi Isle floats above him, Guard preaches that unique talents are divine gifts bestowed only upon children deeply cherished by the heavens. Reaching across the table, Guard gently grasps Isle's tiny hands, pointing out that her instinctual aversion to violence is actually the legendary forgotten talent of true benevolence. Looking directly into her wide green eyes with utter sincerity, Guard urges her never to hide her compassionate heart again, encouraging her to stand proud and believe in her immense self-worth. Isle stares back in stunned silence, internally questioning if a blood-stained warrior princess like her could truly possess a holy talent meant to save lives. Overwhelmed with emotion, Duchess Jen clutches her chest as the magnificent phantom image of Isle's noble past life flares proudly behind her. Duke Simonistus gazes at his daughter with profound awe, realizing beyond a shadow of a doubt that her soul carries the majestic weight of a true legendary hero. But as Isle tries to pry deeper into her locked memories, the ancient sealing magic suddenly activates, triggering a sharp, painful headache that makes her wince in agony. Rushing to her side, her parents urgently kneel beside her chair, pleading with her to stop digging into the past and focus only on the present. Duke Simon Testis tenderly caresses her hair, promising with absolute devotion that until she grows older, her family will shield her from every danger in the world. Little Isle nods softly, feeling her heart overflow with gratitude. Brightening up the mood, Guard claps his hands together, proposing a cozy evening campfire to celebrate their reconciliation. As Simantus lifts Isle onto his shoulder, she internally sweat drops, realizing her heavy existential crisis was just glossed over, but happily accepting the fun party anyway. As dusk settles over the estate grounds, the entire family gathers around a roaring campfire under the shimmering starry sky, raising their cups in a cheerful toast. Sitting comfortably under the cozy tent, Little Isle sips her warm tea, reflecting on how much her guarded heart has opened up since joining this chaotic, loving family. Gazing around at her laughing parents and the energetic boys, Ale makes a silent, resolute vow deep within her soul, promising to use whatever strength she possesses to defend their priceless happiness. Noticing her quiet, thoughtful gaze, her parents lean in warmly, asking if she feels bored. Isle shakes her tiny head, softly admitting she just feels a little unaccustomed to such lively gatherings. Hearing her admission, Guard suddenly whips out a traditional stringed instrument with a proud blush, loudly announcing he will perform a grand apology song just for her. Recognizing the imminent sonic disaster, Duke Simonistus, Duchess Jen, and young Brel all jump up in complete horror, screaming at him to put the instrument away. Both Isle and Adamon tilt their heads in total cluelessness, completely unaware of the auditory torture about to be unleashed.
Guard strums the strings wildly, howling an ear-splitting, horribly off-key ballad. Brel frantically leaps forward to cover Ael's ears while poor Idamon writhes on the ground screaming.
Unable to endure the chaotic noise for another second, Duchess Jen activates her nature magic, sprouting massive thorny vines that instantly bind and gag Guard mid-song. Talk about absolute zero tolerance for bad singing. Bound head to toe in prickly vines, Guard groans through his gag, whining about how his wife always forgives him whenever he plays this exact song after an argument. Stepping forward with a deadpan expression, young Brel hilariously exposes his father, explaining that his mother only forgives him, so he'll stop playing that atrocious noise as quickly as possible. Duke Simon Tosis and Duchess Jen laugh hysterically at Brel's blunt burn, mocking Guard's terrible musical skills. Chuckles, while Guard muffledly accuses the entire couple of bullying him. Toddler Adamon angrily points a tiny finger, screaming at Guard for being way too loud, while the camera pans out to the tranquil night sky as chaotic family laughter echoes across the estate grounds. Holding her warm teacup with both hands, little Isle beams with a radiant, genuine smile, softly remarking to herself how truly wonderful and lovely her new family is. Hearing her quiet words, Duke Simontis and Duchess Jen suddenly freeze mid-laugh, turning toward her with wide, stunned eyes. Blinking her innocent green eyes in cute confusion, little Isle touches her chin, wondering why her parents are staring at her with such overwhelming emotion. Realization suddenly hits her like a bolt of lightning as a flustered thought bubble appears, gasping in utter embarrassment as she realizes she accidentally spoke her sweet inner thoughts right out loud. What a perfectly wholesome way to wrap up this hilarious chapter.